Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Supervisors meeting of June 23rd, 2015. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Avalos.
Present.
Avalos present. President Breed.
Here.
Breed present. Supervisor Campos.
Present.
Campos present. Supervisor Christensen.
Present.
Christensen present. Supervisor Cohen. Here. Cohen present. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell present. Supervisor Kim.
Here.
Kim present. Supervisor Marr.
Here.
Marr present. Supervisor Tang.
Present.
Tang present. Supervisor Wiener.
Present.
Wiener present. Supervisor Yee.
Present.
Yee present. Madam President, all members are present.
Great, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, can you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any communications?
I have no communications today, Madam President.
Colleagues, are there any changes to the May 12th board meeting minutes or the May 13th special budget and finance committee meeting minutes? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve those minutes? Motioned by Supervisor Marr, seconded by Supervisor Tang. Colleague, can we take this without objection? Without objection, those meeting minutes will be approved after public comment. Madam Clerk, will you please read the consent agenda?
Items 1 through 10 comprise the consent calendar. These items are considered routine. If a member objects, an item may be removed and considered separately.
Seeing no names on the roster, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
On items 1 through 10, Supervisor Wiener. Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen.
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen. Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. There are 11 ayes.
These items are passed and approved unanimously. Madam Clerk, can you call item 11?
Item 11 is the interim proposed budget and appropriation ordinance to appropriate all estimated receipts and expenditures for the departments. Madam President, would you like me to call item 12 as well?
Yes, please.
Item 12 is the interim proposed annual salary ordinance enumerating positions, continuing, creating, or establishing full-time or temporary positions in the annual budget and appropriation ordinance and specifying and fixing compensations and work schedules for the fiscal years ending June 30th, 2016 and 17.
Colleagues, can we take these items, same house, same call? Without objection, these ordinances pass unanimously. Madam Clerk, can you call items 13 and 14 together?
Item 13 and 14 are two resolutions to determine and declare that the public interest and necessity demand the construction, acquisition, improvement, and rehabilitation, preservation, and repair of affordable housing improvements and related costs to be financed through bonded indebtedness. Item 13 is in the amount not to exceed $300 million, and item 14 was referred without recommendation from the Budget and Finance Committee in the amount of $350 million.
Colleagues, can we entertain a motion to continue these items to the meeting of July 7th? Moved by Supervisor Marr, seconded by Supervisor Yee. Can we take that without objection? Without objection, items 13 and 14 will be moved to the meeting of July 7th, 2015. Madam Clerk, can you please call item 15?
Item 15 is an ordinance to amend the Administrative Code to revise Chapter 6, the Public Works Contracting Policies and Procedures.
Roll call vote.
On item 15, Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
No.
Avalos, no. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
No.
Campos, no. Supervisor Christensen.
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
No.
Marr, no. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. There are 8 ayes, 3 noes, with the noes being Supervisors Avalos, Campos, and Marr.
This ordinance is finally passed. Item 16, please.
Item 16 is an ordinance to amend the Health Code, Article 12C, to require that new buildings of 250,000 square feet or more of gross floor area be constructed, operated, and maintained using available alternate water sources, that new buildings similarly of 40,000 square feet prepare water budget calculations, and that subdivision approval requirements include compliance with Article C, and to amend the Public Works Code to provide that pipelines and other facilities constructed in accordance with Article 12C and located in the public rights-of-way are exempt from the assessment fees, and affirming the Planning Department's CEQA determination.
Roll call vote.
On item 16, Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen.
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. There are 11 ayes.
This ordinance is finally passed unanimously. Item number 17.
Item 17 is an ordinance to amend the administrative code to require that all city elected officials keep public daily calendars of their meetings and events, and to require that calendars kept by elected officials and department heads include information about the identities of persons in attendance.
Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you, Madam President. So, colleagues, I have an amendment for this ordinance that would trigger, if it were approved, trigger a first reading for this ordinance to have a second reading in July. I wanted to make sure that we were clear about how we conduct our sharing our internal calendars for our internal offices and the offices of departments as well. I do know that we have many incidental meetings within our offices, also within our city department offices, that I think would be very, very cumbersome and rather not necessary to be able to say some of these meetings happen just on the spur of the moment, where conversation is held, and I think it would be quite difficult to actually keep track of all of those. But I think the standing meetings that we do have are the ones that are going to be most important, that stay on our calendar. So I have an amendment. It's for page 3 of this legislation in subsection E, and starts on line 9. I'll read the whole section so it's clear. The obligations imposed under subsection B and C and the obligations imposed upon members of the Board of Supervisors under subsection A shall not apply to meetings or events where city business is discussed only incidentally, to unplanned casual conversations with residents, or to campaign-related events and appearances, or, and here's a new section, or to meetings or events where all attendees are employees or officers in the official city department, which for members of the Board of Supervisors shall mean that all attendees are members of the Board of Supervisors, legislative aides, or employees of the office of the clerk of the board. So what I wanted to make sure was that we are not just the meetings that happen spur of the moment, that are part of our day-to-day work here at the board. That would just be really difficult to keep track of. So that will be my amendment, and hoping to have your support, colleagues.
Supervisor Avalos has made a motion to amend the legislation based on what was read into the record, and it was seconded by Supervisor Campos. Colleagues, can we take this amendment without objection? Without objection, the amendment passes. And on the underlying item, colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, this item passes as a first reading unanimously. Madam Clerk, can you call the next item, please?
Item 18 is an ordinance to appropriate $4 million from the fiscal year 2014-15 Hetch Hetchy Power Enterprise Fund balance to provide short-term working capital needed for the initial startup of the Community Choice Aggregation Program.
Same house, same call. Without objection, this ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. Next item, please.
Item 19, ordinance to amend the Environment and Administrative Codes to transfer the fleet management and vehicle selection elements of the Healthy Air and Clean Transportation Program from the Department of the Environment to the City Administrator to replace mandatory fleet reduction requirements with policies to optimize the size and use of the city's vehicle fleet.
Supervisor Farrell.
Thank you, President Breed. So, colleagues, today in front of us is legislation that I authored back last September to improve and reform the way we manage our municipal vehicle fleet. I want to thank Supervisors Avalos, Kim, and Marr for their co-sponsorship, and certainly Supervisor Avalos in particular for his previous work around the HACTA ordinance. Since introduction, my office has worked with our Department of the Environment and our City Administrator's Office to merge our HACTO policy with my proposal to provide one comprehensive policy that will govern our city's fleet. The proposal in front of us today will ensure that our city continues to push the envelope in order to further green our fleet, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and find further cost savings. Overall, this legislation leverages new technologies and data in order to reduce costs, further lower vehicle emissions, and improve the safety of our municipal fleet. The package in front of us is built on 4 key pillars. First, expanding the implementation of telematics on our municipal fleet where practical in order to better track and analyze operations and use data. Establishing for the first time in the city's history a vehicle assignment and reservation system to increase efficiency and utilization and move away from, believe it or not, what we have today, a paper and clipboard reservation system and assignment system that we have for our municipal fleet in many instances. Updating environmental and oversight provisions and bringing our greenhouse gas emission reduction goals in alignment with a recent federal executive order issued this past March. And lastly, achieving cost savings over time through fleet and fuel reduction and better efficiencies with the installation of telematics systems. For the first time in our city's history, the city administrator will create and oversee a vehicle assignment system and reservation system for a 300-vehicle city car-sharing fleet, which would be the largest in California and one of the largest in the country. Fleet management will oversee the program, which will be implemented in 2 phases. First, a 165-vehicle trial period this year, and fleet management will review the lessons learned from this pilot and incorporate analytical findings to build into an expanded program of 300 vehicles in 2016. Additionally, the legislation requires expanding and formalizing the ongoing implementation of telematics data systems in the city's vehicles fleet. To date, telematics have been installed in over 2,700 vehicles and equipment, including 1,350 light-duty vehicles, and transmit a rich variety of operations and use data. The fleet management is going to leverage this data to develop the vehicle assignment system and a reservation system. They are going to identify and be able to reassign underutilized cars and assets to vehicle pools, which will reduce the size of the fleet and cut acquisition expenses in the future. It will allow the fleet management team to retire cars and other assets that are unneeded or exorbitantly expensive to maintain, often the oldest vehicles with the highest maintenance expense and worst emission standards, and will ensure that city-owned vehicles are used appropriately and safely to conduct city business. This proposal will also help the city generate significant cost savings over time when implemented, and the installation of the telematics data systems will be the main driver of this cost savings. It will allow management to identify underutilized vehicles for possible evaluation and reassignment, and identify vehicles that are no longer cost-effective or necessary or can be retired. Just as an example, an internal analysis found that a 5% reduction to the light-duty non-safety fleet would generate an approximate $3 million savings over a few years, or a $6 million savings tied to a 10% reduction. Efficiencies, reduced idling, and greater oversight of vehicle use are also anticipated to reduce fuel costs. Again, as an example, a 5% reduction in fuel usage would entail approximately $350,000 in annual savings, or 10%, it's around $750,000. These estimates demonstrate the value of proposed reductions here in the city of San Francisco. Greenhouse gas emissions will be further reduced through this proposal by aligning reduction targets to the recent federal executive order to cut average per mile gas emissions by 15% by June 30th of 2021. We're going to ensure we meet these aggressive greenhouse gas reduction goals by requiring the city administrator to review and report on its greenhouse gas emissions each year to ensure the ongoing implementation of best practices in consultation with our Department of the Environment. We already have one of the greenest and most environmentally friendly fleets in the country, and this proposal will continue our role as a national environmental leader. I do want to personally thank a number of departments, including the City Administrator's Office, Fleet Management, the Department of the Environment, Jess Montejano from my office, for their hard work on this proposal and coming up with one of the strongest fleet management policies in the state and in our country. By voting to support this policy today, we're further cementing our city's role as a national leader in fleet management, helping our environment, and saving taxpayer dollars. Colleagues, I ask for your support.
Thank you, Supervisor Farrell. Colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, this ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. Madam Clerk, can you please call item number 20?
Item 20 is an ordinance to amend Articles 33F and 33G of the Police Code, which contain the Formula Retail Employee Rights Ordinance.
Supervisor Farrell.
Thank you, President Breed. So, colleagues, in front of us today for item number 20 is a package of trailing amendments to the Retail Workers' Bill of Rights that represents a collective agreement from all parties that have been involved in further working on this issue since we originally passed the ordinance last year. I want to reiterate again that I support the policy that we passed last year because I do believe it is the right thing for the city to do. And I know that thankfully many of our formula retailers employ such policies that give extra hours for their part-time employees even without this ordinance being in place. But it's also important to get the policy right because it does set a precedent for future policies that we're seeing spring up throughout our country. In terms of the package of amendments, the First Amendment ensures that this policy truly targets large formula retail establishments, which was the intent of this legislation. It changes the number of locations needed to be considered formula retail under the ordinance from 20 locations to 40, and ensures that our small and mid-sized businesses are not equated on the same scale as larger formula retail establishments. It's no surprise that many small and medium-sized businesses do not have the same resources here in the city of San Francisco or anywhere else in our country, and we want to make sure we continue to support them. The Second Amendment updates the current collective bargaining language to ensure that property service contractors are included as well. And the Third Amendment gives a short grace period to employers for at least 3 months after the effective date of the ordinance so that no monetary policies are levied before the rulemaking process is completed by OLSC. But the amendment does give OLSC the opportunity to give a warning and follow up directly with the employer if they are thought to be in violation of the law. The next amendments provide more clarity and direction to employers about how they will notify their employees about extra available hours through email and in writing, which was a huge concern after we passed this legislation originally last year. Additionally, the amendment requires that employers inform their employer within a 72-hour time period about whether they would like to accept the additional offer of hours. And last, the amendment closes a loophole by requiring employers to provide employees scheduled to work on-call shifts with predictability pay if the employer modifies the scheduling of that shift with less than 7 days' notice. I do believe the amendments in front of us today strengthen our current policy and provide common sense reforms to what we passed out last year. And I want to say I was extremely encouraged. I want to thank Supervisor Moore in particular for his leadership in working in a collaborative process on this issue. And in particular, in his office, his aide, Nick, the Retail Workers' Bill of Rights Steering Committee, which is composed of numerous labor and advocate organizations, the Chamber of Commerce as well, and many of the other employers that inputted on this legislation. And colleagues, I would ask for your support.
Supervisor Mark.
Thank you. I wanted to especially say that Supervisor Farrell spent a huge amount of hours and his staff on this package of amendments. I'm very supportive of this. I think he already mentioned the broad-based labor community coalition that worked very hard to pass it last year with our former president, David Chu, now in the Assembly. I wanted to also acknowledge that the Retail Workers' Bill of Rights was the first in the nation. It's being watched on a national level. There's a national movement looking at ways to increase low-wage workers' pay and working conditions. Retail Workers' Bill of Rights, our campaign was about providing dignity for part-time and low-wage workers, largely people of color, women, and immigrant workers as well. I wanted to say that promoting full-time work and access to hours for low-wage workers is critical. The second prong was discouraging abusive on-call scheduling practices. The third was promoting equal treatment for part-time workers, many of them low-wage workers at the bottom of the economic ladder in our cities. And lastly was worker retention and job security. But because of the work of Supervisor Farrell, the coalition, and many others, we have tightened up the Retail Workers' Bill of Rights, and I think this is an important part of making it a better law. I think the notification parts and closing of loopholes is really critical. And then also being conscious that there are some small chains that are local that are really important to our city, and that focusing on the large retailers was the intent of the policy. Lastly, I'll just say thanks not only to Nick Pagalatos from my staff, but Jess Montejano from Supervisor Farrell's office, Nikki Wheaton from the Mayor's office, Todd Rufo from our Office of Economic and Workforce Development, but especially the 30-member coalition of grassroots, labor, and community organizations made up of leadership of low-wage workers themselves that really drove our historic Retail Workers' Bill of Rights policy. So I urge support for these amendments. Thank you.
President Breed.
Thank you. I want to thank Supervisor Farrell and Supervisor Marr for taking the lead on working on this legislation in order to make it better legislation for the workers that it's intended to serve. Colleagues, I just want to offer one simple amendment to this legislation. I've been a supporter of this legislation since it was introduced last fall, and I think it's very important for workers to have advance notice so that they can plan their schedules, care for their families, and make doctor's appointments, schedule college classes. These are just a few of some of the things that I've heard from some of the workers who wanted this legislation to move through. I also support today's proposed amendments by Supervisor Farrell, which clarify and improve the original legislation. But there's one thing that I think we need to address, and that's movie theaters. By their very nature, they cannot comply with this advanced scheduling requirement. The movie studios, global corporations, which are totally independent from the actual movie theaters, dictate what films are shown and when. The studios make those decisions on a weekly basis, and the theaters find out at best on Monday or Tuesday before the Friday showings. Until then, the theaters do not know. And how many films they will show, how many films will be on the screens. They don't know how many times a day a movie will actually be shown, as well as how popular a movie will be. All of these factors impact how a movie theater needs to be staffed. Meaning the theaters are literally incapable of predicting their staff needs every 4 days in advance, much less 2 weeks in advance. It is wholly beyond their control and their knowledge. This is not unique to San Francisco. The entire movie industry works this way. I don't mean to question the intent of the legislation. I would genuinely like an explanation of how we expect San Francisco movie theaters operators to support or comply with this law, and how is it even possible? And maybe Attorney John Givner can give us a response of how we can actually make this work with movie theaters.
Mr. Givner.
Deputy City Attorney John Givner, that's really a policy question for the board to consider, perhaps with OLSC's advice.
Okay, thank you. So I'm very worried about subjecting a handful of businesses to the law that we know full well they cannot comply with. Aside from just being bad policy, this seems increasingly unfair and likely subject us to a lawsuit because of factors far beyond their control. Movie theaters will be out of compliance from day one and will never be able to comply. There are 3 companies with 7 movie theaters in the city that will be subjected to this legislation. AMC, which runs the Metreon and Van Ness theaters, Cinemark, which runs the Westfield and CineArts at the Empire, and Landmark Theater, who has the Embarcadero Center, the Opera Plaza, and Clay Theaters. Collectively, they have about 257 employees at these theaters, and if this legislation goes into effect as drafted, the theaters will likely have to pay penalties on each one. And unfortunately, the most likely outcome is that the theaters will simply lay off employees, and I'm sure none of us want to see that happen. In other words, this could potentially hurt employees, not help the employees that we intend to serve. I'm proposing a simple amendment to Section 3300.G.4b, which I think we can do as an addition at the end of the paragraph, stating that an employer that qualifies as a movie theater as defined in Planning Code Section 102, 790.64, and 890.64 shall be exempt from the provisions of this subsection and subsection C and D of section 3300G.4. I know some have argued that granting this handful of movie theaters an exemption will open up some Pandora's box and undermine the entire legislation. And just let me be clear, I support this legislation. I'm offering this amendment because I support it. I want the legislation to work. I want it to be fair. And if these 7 theaters are somehow going to cause a slippery slope where every business requests an exemption, where is the evidence of that? We have been working on this legislation for over the year. What other businesses have made a compelling case, or even a slight case, that their business model fundamentally prevents them from actually complying with this legislation? There's no slippery slope here, and there are no other businesses lined up outside waiting to slide down. This is a unique set of circumstances for a very small number of businesses who are simply unable to meet these requirements. I think granting them this limited exemption is fair. Is the fair thing to do, and it's in keeping with the overall intent of the legislation. So, colleagues, I ask for your support, and I talked to our city attorney, John Givner, who tells me that these are substantive amendments, so if the amendment passes, I suggest that we duplicate the file and we amend the duplicated file and send that back to committee so that we can take public comment on it. But in the meantime, I'd like to move forward with the current legislation and with Supervisor Farrell's proposed amendments so that there is an opportunity for the public to provide feedback on my proposed substantive amendments. Thank you.
So, colleagues, President Breed has made a motion to amend. Is there a second? Supervisor Christensen has seconded.
I'm sorry, Supervisor Campos. Just for clarity, I want to duplicate the file first,
you want to
and I only want to make an amendment to the duplicated file that will go back to Budget Committee to be heard.
So, Madam Clerk, I think the file can be duplicated.
Single privilege of a supervisor to duplicate.
So the file has been duplicated, and the motion has been to amend the duplicated file.
Okay.
So,
Yes.
and that motion has been seconded by Supervisor Christensen. So before we act on that, are there any comments on the amendment? Supervisor Marr.
I guess I appreciate Supervisor Breed's effort at this last minute of finalizing the legislation and the duplication of the files, so at least the hard work that Supervisor Farrell and our office made can go forward. I'll just say that I do think it's a slippery slope. We did meet with the local theater operators and understand their concerns, but we know on a national level the industry is against major changes that help to raise the wages and working conditions of low-wage workers. And I know as David Chu in the Assembly moves forward with state legislation that there's a strong feeling that watering down important employment rights for low-wage workers is not the right thing to do, and that there are other industries that we're looking at similar loopholes to be created. So I would strongly urge my colleagues not to support additional amendments, and again, we'll reiterate that I'm appreciative of Supervisor Farrell's work with our office to move the proposed amendments forward, and I would just speak against the one that Supervisor Breed is mentioning. Thank you.
Supervisor Christensen.
Perhaps I can provide a little clarity as I represent the district where then Supervisor Chu came from. We have been in touch with him about these amendments, and we ran this particular exception by him, and he expressed no particular reservations about this. So I don't think any of us can speak for him, but he, as the original author, he was consulted on this and did not object strenuously at that time.
So, colleagues, we have a motion to amend the duplicated file with President Breed. President Breed, you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just want to get clarity because I know that Supervisor Farrell, from my understanding, has made amendments, which I would like the amendments that he's proposing to be included in both files. So I just want to make sure because we had not approved those just yet.
Okay.
So should we go and take those amendments first? So we... No? Supervisor Farrell.
I do believe that what the amendments are actually the entirety of what we are proposing today and voting on. So technically the amendments are what we're voted on. So by duplicating the five simply, we've already duplicated all of the amendments.
That was my understanding, that they're embedded in whatever is before us.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that clarity.
So we have a motion by President Reed, seconded by Supervisor Christensen, to amend the duplicated file. On that motion, can we take a roll call vote, Madam Clerk?
Supervisor Wiener?
No.
Wiener, no. Supervisor Yee?
No.
Yee, no. Supervisor Avalos?
No.
Avalos, no. Supervisor Breed?
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos?
No.
Campos, no. Supervisor Christensen? Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen?
No.
Cohen, no. Supervisor Farrell?
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim?
No.
Kim, no. Supervisor Marr?
No.
Mar, no. Supervisor Tang?
Aye.
Tang, aye. There are 4 ayes and 7 noes. With the noes, Supervisor Weiner, Yee, Avalos, Campos, Cohen, Kim, and Mar.
So the motion to amend the duplicated file fails.
Want to do the underline?
Colleagues, any other comments? Supervisor Weiner, did you have a no? So we have a duplicated file that's in front of us as well. Supervisor Breed, President Breed, how do you want to proceed?
I want to send the duplicated file to Budget Committee.
So we have a motion to send that. Madam Clerk, we need a second on that motion. Seconded by Supervisor Tang. Colleagues, is there any? Do you want to have a roll call on that motion? Why don't we have a roll call on that motion?
On the motion to send the duplicated file to committee, Supervisor Weiner.
Aye.
Weiner, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
No.
Avalos, no. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
No.
Campos, no. Supervisor Christensen.
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim.
No.
Kim, no. Supervisor Mar.
No.
Mar, no. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. There are 7 ayes and 4 noes, with the noes being Supervisor Avalos, Campos, Kim, and Mar.
So the duplicated file motion passes, and that duplicated file will be sent back to committee.
Thank you. And on the underlying item, can we have a roll call vote, Madam Clerk?
On item 20.
There wasn't any amendment, so just on the underlining item.
On item 20, Supervisor Weiner.
Aye.
Weiner, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen.
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Mar.
Aye.
Mar, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. There are 11 ayes.
This item is passed unanimously on the first reading. Madam Clerk, can you call item 21?
Item 21 is an ordinance to amend the Planning and Public Works Code for certain types of development projects to shift the authority from the Planning Department to the Public Works to require a permit to perform major maintenance on a street tree within a specified distance of a general advertising sign, to require a tree protection plan review and approval, to adopt a fee, to impose penalties for violations, and to provide Public Works staff enforcement authority, and affirming the Planning Department's CEQA determination.
Supervisor Weiner.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, as you know, we have been working very hard, a broad coalition, to try to improve the city's approach to our urban forests, including our street trees. We have over 100,000 street trees in San Francisco, and our policy, which basically dumps responsibility for those trees on adjacent property owners, guarantees inconsistent maintenance, and is just a very bad approach to having a robust and healthy urban forest, which is so important for our environment, our quality of life, and so we need to make fundamental change in that policy. The legislation before us today is one small piece of improving our approach to our urban forest, and it will help us to have a healthier set of trees and to reduce the number of trees that are basically mutilated under the guise of maintenance. I want to thank Supervisor Christensen for her co-sponsorship, and I want to thank Andres Power in my office for his work on the legislation. The legislation does 3 primary things. First, it transfers over the provisions in the Planning Code requiring tree planting for new developments to the Public Works Code. This will streamline the review process, remove unnecessary bureaucratic delay, and help ensure that new developments are contributing toward a greener city by having a more efficient process to actually plant required street trees next to those developments. Second, the legislation will help ensure that billboard owners are not destroying existing street trees in order to maintain the visibility of their ads, of their billboards. Right now, homeowners, for example, are not permitted to destroy a healthy street tree in order to maximize their view. Billboard companies shouldn't be allowed to do so either. Unfortunately, we have seen a number of circumstances where billboard companies will go in and purport to be maintaining a tree or trimming it back in order to increase the visibility of their billboard, and in the process they mutilate the tree and sometimes even kill it. This legislation will require that if you perform maintenance on a street tree within a short distance around a billboard, you have to get a permit to do that. This will allow the Department of Public Works to monitor and set conditions on that maintenance. And then finally, the legislation will strengthen the requirements to protect existing street trees during construction. The amendment today, this legislation will require a tree protection plan to be submitted to the Department of Public Works prior to the commencement of construction. This is a simple and straightforward requirement and will help ensure that as construction happens in the city, whether it's a small project or a large one, that existing street trees are cared for and not destroyed. So colleagues, I ask for your support.
Thank you. Seeing no other names on the roster, colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Roll call vote, please.
On item 21, Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen.
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. There are 11 ayes.
This item passes unanimously. This ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. Madam Clerk, can you please call the next item?
And through the President to the members, item 22, the title on the agenda is incorrect. And specifically, the Land Use and Transportation Committee on June 15th accepted an amendment of the whole, approving a new title in which both illegal and legal were removed, and a new title for item 22 should have been sent to the agenda. The packet material is correct, and it is also correct on Legistar. The title should read, "A resolution to impose interim zoning controls to require conditional use authorization for mergers of existing units and making the appropriate findings, including findings of consistency with the 8 priority policies of the Planning Code Section 101.1, in consultation with Deputy City Attorney Givner." The item is legally before you today, as the amendment did not expand the scope or the authority of the resolution. It only reduced it, so you can consider it today.
Okay. Supervisor Avalos?
Thank you, President Breed. Colleagues, in 2013, I authored an ordinance to strengthen our protections against removal of existing housing through demolition, merger, and conversion. Last month, I introduced an ordinance to further strengthen these protections, and today we are considering a resolution to establish interim controls to require conditional use permit for all mergers. This will limit the loss of housing we're currently seeing both at the top of the market and at the bottom of the market. Currently, the Planning Code doesn't require a CU for mergers of units that are demonstrably not affordable. But in our current crazy housing market, it doesn't make sense to allow mergers of higher-end units. Recently, there was a merger of 2 nondescript Noe Valley apartments that were considered demonstrably not affordable. The other area where we are seeing unacceptable loss of housing through mergers is in the elimination of unpermitted in-law units. Because of the overheated housing market, we have seen disreputable landlords remove in-laws from single-family homes in order to remove rent control from the building. We've also heard of landlords removing in-law units in order to evict their existing tenants and then turn around and re-rent the unit at a higher rent. However, we've heard concerns from the planning department that requiring conditional use permits for removal of unpermitted units could put property owners in a catch-22 situation. The Department of Building Inspection could be telling them that they need to remove a unit, but the Planning Commission would not allow this to happen without CU. I hope to work with the DBI and the Planning Department on a solution to preserve unpermitted units in the near future. With our new program to legalize in-law units, there is no reason that we should continue to allow these units to be removed. So at land use last week, we amended the interim controls to only apply to merger of legal units. And I ask for your support on this resolution today, and I look forward to working with the DBI and the Planning Department on a way to protect the unpermitted units, many of which happen to be in District 11. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, colleagues. See no other names on the roster. Colleagues, can we take this item? Same house, same call. Without objection, this resolution is adopted unanimously. Madam Clerk, can you call the next item, please?
Item 23 is a resolution to establish a Board of Supervisors policy that police staffing levels be adjusted to account for population and neighborhood growth.
Supervisor Wiener.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, today before us is a resolution that I've authored along with authors Supervisor Cohen and Supervisor Farrell, calling for an increase in our minimum police staffing level to take population growth and staffing in peer cities into account. By any measure, colleagues, our police department is understaffed. Over the past decade, our city has grown by about 100,000 people. We have neighborhoods that did not exist a decade or two ago. We have more people working here. We have more cars on the road, more people on transit, and more traffic safety needs than ever. Yet despite that significant growth, we have nearly 300 fewer police officers than we did 5 years ago.
Through the President. Through the President.
Colleagues, we're going to take a recess.
SFGTV,
Give me
please.
just a second, Supervisor Wiener.
Okay. Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues,
One second.
Checking with
It's on.
SFGTV. Okay, we're back.
It's on.
Okay.
Thank you. Having too few police officers has profound impacts on public safety. We all want strong community policing, and community policing requires having enough officers.
Excuse me, to members of the public, we're conducting a meeting and we'd like to get through this item, so if you don't mind.
Madam President, actions that are prohibited during board meetings include standing in the chamber in addition to vocal expression.
Supervisor Weiner.
Thank you, Madam President.
If I continue to get outburst, then I will recess the meeting.
Fuck the police! School's not dead!
Supervisor Weiner.
We all want strong community policing, and community policing requires having enough officers walking beats, which we don't have. Having too few officers means less traffic enforcement than we need. We have an epidemic of street collisions. We have an epidemic of street collisions, including pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers, and we need more traffic enforcement. Having too few officers means less focus on property crimes. San Francisco has experienced a veritable explosion of property crimes, ranging from auto break-ins to vandalism to burglaries. We need more police officers, and we need to work hard to get there. San Francisco's charter sets 1,971 police officers as full staffing, and we are projected to reach that number by 2017 or 2018, growing from our current approximately 1,700 officers. Thanks to strong collaboration among the mayor, the Board of Supervisors, and the police department, we have been funding multiple police academy classes per year after a number of years without any academy classes. Yet that 1,971 number was established in the charter in 1994 when we were a smaller city. Our population has grown by over 13% since then.
Holly, excuse me.
Yeah.
Clearly we can't. Clearly we will not be able to conduct business with continued outbursts from the audience. So either you allow us to conduct business or we can take a recess and not continue with this item. Supervisor Weiner.
If you increase 1971 by our 13% population growth, you exceed 2,200, and that's why we are proposing, in part, a 2,200 model for full police staffing. And of course, as you know, colleagues, San Francisco is projected to continue to grow by another 150,000 people by 2040. If we don't modernize our staffing goals, the shortage of police officers will only get worse. But this 2,200 number isn't just based on adjusting the 1971 staffing number by population growth or by the fact that we have neighborhoods now that did not used to exist. Other analysis comes to the same conclusion. In 2008, when we were a smaller city, the Police Executive Research Forum, PERF, published a report recommending staffing levels to achieve goals of improved community policing and crime fighting in San Francisco, which included staffing levels of up to 2,254 officers in San Francisco. Additionally, we now have the Controller's Report on police staffing, which looks at our staffing levels when compared to other peer cities. If we look at those peer cities studied in the Controller's Report, for example, Chicago, Philadelphia, Boston, and Washington, D.C., the average per capita staffing was 271 officers per 100,000 residents. On the higher end, Chicago has 440 and Philadelphia 418. Washington, D.C. has 613 officers per 100,000 residents. We have 239, below average and far below our peer cities. So if we were to increase San Francisco just to the average per capita of peer cities, that would put our police staffing level at 2,279. Those are just three metrics showing that that more than 2,200 officers would be an appropriate police staffing policy goal for our city. If anything, the number is conservative. The need is there. We have the second highest rate of property crime of peer cities. Oakland is the only city that's higher, based on both resident population and daytime population. And I want to be clear, we all want to make our police department as efficient as possible. We all want to make sure that we are appropriately training our officers. We all want the highest standards of conduct for our officers. But prioritizing and achieving these goals doesn't mean that we shouldn't be adequately staffed in terms of the number of officers in our department. Colleagues, I, for years, have been hearing from police captains in my district when asked why aren't there more beat officers on the street, why isn't there more traffic enforcement, and the answer is always the same. We have a shortage of police officers. We need more community policing. We need more officers on the beat. We need more traffic enforcement, and so I ask for your support. I do want to note that there are some amendments being proposed by Supervisor Cohen and Breed and myself, and I'm supportive of those amendments. And I also just want to thank everyone who has expressed both support and opposition to this resolution. Public safety is an incredibly important issue. I know it's one about which many, many people are passionate. I also know that there are many people in this city who believe that we need more neighborhood safety, better neighborhood safety, and to achieve that, we need more community policing, which requires adequate police staffing levels. So, colleagues, I ask for your support.
Thank you, Supervisor Weiner. Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Recently, I introduced some legislation that would increase the transparency and the reporting requirements for police and sheriffs who stop and detain residents. And you may recall there was a time when Mayor Lee was considering implementing stop and frisk. I think that one thing that we have in common with everyone in this, not only in this body but also in this chamber, is that we are all in agreement that stop and frisk wasn't the correct way and the correct policy to be implemented in San Francisco. And I use this as an example of how we have come together and been able to address our policing issues. I want to remind you that today's resolution is not about addressing all of the root causes of violence. I agree, education, access to quality health care and jobs, all police brutality, all have a role to play. But today's resolution is not about just addressing the root causes of violence in our communities, but it's also about recognizing our approach in determining police staffing levels and recognizing that it is outdated and it doesn't meet our needs. I think we need to begin to change our approach, and we need to base it on what the data and what other constituents are continually telling us. The focus, just as a reminder, the focus of this resolution is on police staffing and what our city's needs are. The goal is not to have a comprehensive resolution about each and every component of violence prevention. That's not typically what resolutions do. We're focused on police staffing. If other members of the Board of Supervisors want to introduce a separate resolution to express alternative viewpoints, that's their choice, and I look forward to having that discussion. But by focusing on this issue, I just want to remind you that we are in no way limiting or dismissing all of the other work the city is doing and will continue to do in public safety issues.
Over here threatening us, scaring us, terrorizing us. We want justice for Police brutality happened right there. You just want to pass it? What is it? What the fuck?
Thank you, Supervisor Cohen. Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you, President Breed. Colleagues, all of us are united by the fact that we want our residents and our neighborhoods to be safe. What we disagree upon is the exact pathway to get there. In this next year's budget are funded 5 police academy classes with an additional 3 classes in the following year. I don't believe there is opposition to these classes going forward. There could be a discussion about how these classes are trained that I think is still in process, but those classes are actually going forward, and because we're trying to get to the 1971 number of minimum staffing that has been elusive for us since 1994. There was a time when we actually had achieved that 1971 staffing level in 2009. And then that was the year that we were able to establish beat officers in the Excelsior on two different tracks, simultaneous tracks in the Excelsior district. This resolution actually, though, is not recognizing that the great gulf that exists right now to reaching that 1971 staffing level. We have had a lot of retirements that have happened in the police department, and the aggressive plan that we have with the police academy classes has really been about getting to that 1971 number. It doesn't make any sense to be lifting the cap on that 1971 number when we still have to demonstrate to ourselves as a city how effective that 1971 number is. And we're basing a lot of the information about what our staffing levels can be on really anecdotal data. It's really data that doesn't necessarily add up to a conclusion that we need to have a larger police force. This resolution is not about next year's budget, though. What it is about tying the hands of the city on a singular, unproven approach to setting police staffing levels based on population. Basing staffing levels solely on population growth ignores many other factors that contribute to public safety. Most of all, this resolution ignores a large body of evidence. And I'd like to go over some of that right now. My staff member, Jeremy Pollock, is here. I'm also proposing an alternative resolution as well, which actually calls into question about how ready we are as a board to set any kind of policy whatsoever about what our process for police staffing should be. So starting off, there are other reasons for establishing, there actually would rather establish a multidisciplinary process for establishing police staffing levels. What we have right now brought before us has been a process that I've talked to I've talked to one police commissioner who did not even know there's a resolution before the Board of Supervisors saying that we should actually increase our staffing levels to 2,200 police officers. What kind of process to establish staffing levels would exclude the police commission? It makes no sense to me. So here are some of my major concerns. Statistics show that crime has actually gone down as population has increased. You'll see one of our slides coming forward that'll show that, and based on Department of Justice data. We also believe it's true. There might be a correlation between having a police department and crime and the level of crime, but there is no direct correlation between police spending and crime rates. You can make anecdotal connections, but there are so many other factors that lead to what our crime rates are. Basing police staffing solely on population is not good public policy. So let's go to the next slide, on slide 3. Population increase does not mean crime increase. If we look at San Francisco, our population in 1994, our population was 742,316 persons. In 2013, it's now 111 people. If you look at the crime rate in 1994 for both violent crime and property crime, it was higher than it is now. It was higher, even though our population was about 80,000 people less than what we currently have right now. Does it make sense to actually base our growth in the police department on population growth? Are we actually seeing a real rise in violent crime and property crime? I don't believe we are. The evidence suggests otherwise. And so actually, are we basing our push for a larger police force on real data? Also, in my next slide, on slide 4, there's no direct correlation between police spending and crime rates. If you look at an analysis of police spending per capita compared to 2010 crime rates, we shows a wide variation between spending and public safety. Look at this slide on slide 5. You'll see that San Francisco is somewhere in the middle on per capita police spending, but we also have a violent crime rate that is much lower than other places, even places that have, like Washington, D.C., that have a much higher per capita spending for police officers. If there was a direct correlation between police spending on police and crime rates, we'd see less of a scattershot group of dots here. There'd be much more order to what we have here. So it's really clear that police spending doesn't really actually have a real direct relationship to what our crime rates are. You might make an anecdotal connection. It's possible to do that, but it's not clear that they're making a direct connection. You'll see that slide before was on violent crime, and you'll see that property crime. San Francisco is pretty much in the same place, while there's a whole range of how effective spending can be linked to actual property crimes in our different cities around the country. Next slide. Basing police staffing solely on population is bad policy. This is not just an opinion. There's actually been studies that have been done on this. You'll see from the International Association of Chiefs of Police Patrol Staffing and Deployment Study, I quote from them, ratios such as officers per 1,000 population are totally inappropriate as a basis for staffing decisions. Next study from the Department of Justice Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services and Michigan State University School of Criminal Justice. Michigan State is actually a well-considered university in the United States of America. Basing police staffing solely on population is bad policy. Quote from the study, disadvantages of a per capita approach to staffing include its failure to address how officers spend their time, the quality of their efforts, and community conditions, needs, and expectations. Given these disadvantages and others, experts strongly advise against using population rates for determining police staffing needs. This is out of the Department of Justice. Colleagues, are we really approaching this in a sound way? We exclude the police commission members. We actually don't have a real strong process that involves other departments that are doing a lot around public safety. This seems to be a singular approach that's really about responding to what possibly our police captains say and possibly police chiefs say. And I'm not surprised that they're saying the same thing about wanting to have more officers. All while we're still looking at bringing in police academy classes that are probably going to go forward uncontested. Just yesterday, in the budget committee, we tried to actually put on reserve, still allocating the money for the classes, but putting on reserve funds for our police academy classes so we can get a plan about how they're going to deal with racial bias, and that was not supported by the budget committee. It's like we won't even use what leverage we have to actually deal with the overwhelming, influence of the police department, the police staff, and the Police Officers Association. That to me is like not what we should be doing. We should be putting real measures in place to make sure that our policing is going to be a much more better qualitatively. I do appreciate Supervisor Cohen's legislation last week to collect data at the point of stop. That is a very useful tool, and I want to support. I'm going to be co-sponsoring your legislation. I really appreciate that effort, but there are many ways that we need to do the reform work within the police department to make it much safer, to build legitimacy in the eyes of many of these people for the police department before we give more idea about how we're going to staff them at a greater level. And that legitimacy is really lacking. And it's not just the people in this room where it comes from. And I have, I have to admit, to be able to talk about how we do policing it doesn't feel very popular in this room. It doesn't feel very popular in the city. But it's some of the hard work that we have to do as public servants to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make everyone in the city feel safe, and not just ones who believe that the police adding more officers is going to make everyone safe, because that's not how we all feel in San Francisco. Lastly, and my other colleagues have things they want to say as well. There's this whole concept that's been in discourse around police accountability and around our justice system over the past 4 years called the New Jim Crow. It's been established by Michelle Alexander, who used to work for the ACLU here in San Francisco, and she's gone through a lot of the data and a lot of the history that's been in place in this country. We had a huge civil rights movement that actually was able to change laws to actually take away the segregation that was happening in our communities, especially in the South, but across the whole country. The civil rights movement also led to real advances. But then later, we've actually put in place a lot of policies that have led to more people being incarcerated, and disproportionately people of color, African Americans, and Latinos. And when they're incarcerated, they get into a cycle of disenfranchisement. They're cut off from employment. They're cut off from housing. They can't even get public housing, and they actually can't even vote. And so we're creating what is in place a whole system of segregation and disenfranchisement that is equal to what was established in the South under Jim Crow. That's all across the country. And if we're going to be looking at increasing the size of our police department, we know that we're going to be putting more people and the future of young people behind bars. That's just what happens. We look at what the evidence was that happened in the 1990s when President Clinton had given a lot of money for cities all across the country to hire police officers. And then what we saw was that during that time, there was probably 750,000 more people locked up in prisons around the country as a result of that higher policing. The policing is picking up people who have been let down by our system of education, housing, employment, and we have to be looking at the front end of it before we actually lock people up, and going with a police staffing level that is excluding all the other ways that we can build public safety and look at all the other factors that we can establish what the level of policing should be is the wrong way to go. I have a resolution, amendment of the whole that I'd like to introduce, but I'll hear from colleagues first about this. But really what I think should happen is we should send this whole thing back to committee instead of having any vote on it today whatsoever.
Supervisor Kim.
Through the President, to the members of the audience. Your participation is welcome, but we prefer it in spirit fingers. Madam President.
Thank you. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you, and thank you, Supervisor Avalos, for that really good presentation. First of all, let me say that this is a good discussion to have. It raises the question of how we as a body want to make San Francisco a safer city and how we as a body approach this question. One pathway, as presented by this resolution, is to increase the size of our police force based on population growth. It's a one-stop solution to address a myriad of issues our residents face or perceive as public safety issues, ranging from violent crime, graffiti, homelessness, property crime, drug dealing, and more. But let's discuss, as Supervisor Avalos did so eloquently, several of the premises on which this resolution is based. One, that the number of crime incidents in San Francisco is directly related to the number of police officers we have. In fact, there are several examples already presented of how these data points are not necessarily related. In fact, even in our own budget and legislative analyst report, they showcase the example of Sacramento, which increased their police force in 2012 and experienced a tremendous increase in crime. The following year, in 2013, there was a reduction in their police force, and crime also went down significantly. Even in San Francisco, we have seen that as the size of the police force went down, so did violent crime. SFPD, in fact, has been very effective at reducing violent crime in partnership with many community-based organizations, despite a smaller police force each year over the last 5 years. Two, the second premise is that hiring police officers alone will provide the resources we need to address the calls for service that SFPD fields. We can and should be more effective about how we deploy our resources and be smarter with our dollars. One, we need to hit our civilianization goals. San Francisco has one of the highest proportion of police officers performing civilian jobs. This means our highly trained and expensive police officers perform administrative duties, IT, human resources, accounting, jobs easily performed by civilians for less. Two, we have a sheriff's department with a decreasing jail population who can perform station and hospital transfer units, support public events, and do this again more affordably than SFPD officers. C, we know that a percentage of our calls for services are just regarding homeless individuals or individuals with mental health issues. So then, we should grow the homeless outreach team and fund another navigation center. We should fund a rapid housing program and another medical respite shelter like the one that we are building in District 6 in the South of Market, a 24-hour medical respite shelter staffed by nurses and psychologists, thanks to the mayor's commitment to our office this year in the budget of $6.6 million. We can also ask that more of our officers walk the beat, something that most San Franciscans agree that they want to see. But most importantly, the very premise of the resolution before us, with the stated goal of establishing a population-based police staffing policy, that population growth is the sole factor by which policymakers should determine the size of our police. This is far too simplistic, and it's not even appropriate. Supervisor Avalos already mentioned the quote from the International Association of Chief of Police stating that basing police staffing on population is totally inappropriate. Yes, it may make sense to link funding of transportation or education based on population size. Arguably, a larger population may lead to more riders on Muni, assuming that all our new residents don't decide to drive, bike, and walk. But crime does not grow proportionally with population. It's not like there's some consistent number, 15%, 5%, 2% of any given population that commits crimes. Yes, as the population has grown in San Francisco over the last 4 years, so has the number of property crimes. But also at the same time, as the population in San Francisco grew, violent crime went down. Crime rate is just not linked to population numbers. It's not. We can grow another 200,000 residents in San Francisco, and crime rates may not go up at all. Now let's address our approach to how we can make our city safer. I said it at Land Use Committee last Monday that it would be easy for me as an elected official with term limits to promise to the public today that I will fund more police officers. This is a promise that I can easily deliver on during my time. However, it is far more difficult for me to state that I will make the city safer. This statement that I'm about to make can't be misconstrued, so I want to say this carefully. Police officers do not prevent crime. Just as often as I hear we need more officers at community meetings, I also hear police officers say we cannot arrest our way out of crime, a statement that Chief Sir, in fact, repeated to the committee last week. Yes, police officers can respond to a situation involving criminal activity, perhaps even discourage it by its sheer presence, deter it for some time, maybe stop it or even chase the individual after the crime has occurred, thereby bringing this individual to justice. But they don't prevent crime. Police are responding to the opportunity gap, growing inequity, homelessness, even mental health issues that can lead to crimes of opportunity or desperation. But we do know this. We know that keeping a kid in school prevents crime. Over 70% of our San Francisco County jail population are school dropouts. Chief Sir said it at the Land Use Committee last week that keeping a kid in school does prevent crime. In fact, most police officers know better than most people in this room what it would take to truly prevent crime because they arrest the youth and adults that didn't graduate from schools or don't have a secure home. We also know that keeping a family housed or an adult housed definitely prevents crime. So, what if we instead took the number in this resolution, which proposes adding 283 officers to our charter minimum mandate, and who costs on average $175,000 a year per the controller's report, and instead commit those dollars to 283 most at-risk and low-income San Francisco youth at $175,000. I didn't get to finish my sentence, so I'll repeat that. So instead, what if we commit today those dollars to 283 of our most at-risk and low-income San Francisco youth at $175,000 per year for the life of an average police officer's career, which is roughly 25 to 30 years. We ensure that this young person has a secure home, 3 meals a day, the best education, tutoring, enrichment programs, guaranteed college tuition, and an ability to take an unpaid but prestigious internship each summer because they don't need the income. Would that make our city safer? I think it would. So, as we also talk about increasing the size of our police force, it's really important that this resolution also calls for mandating this increase. So before we do that, we need to have a thorough, comprehensive discussion of what it means to build the safer San Francisco. Increasing the size of our police may be the right answer, but let's look at it with other known solutions that prevent crime. And finally, I should say, I don't think that this increase should be a mandate. If we do decide to fund a greater number of police officers in our charter mandates, let's not handcuff future supervisors financially from investing in what they've learned or determined makes the city safer. The city will continue to change, and one number that is appropriate this year may not be the right number in 10 years. I also want to state that my vote today, which will be determined by which resolution moves forward, is not reflective of my opinion of the police department necessarily or its leadership. While I agree with many of the points made by the public here today, I do disagree with the statement, F the police. I think we have a great number of astounding men and women that serve this institution and truly believe in making our communities safer. And many of them are our fathers, our uncles, our sisters, and our nieces. I also support fully funding our charter mandate of 1,971 officers, as our current budget proposes to do. But I just don't believe the police alone are the answers. Finally, this is an issue that comes up a lot whenever we bring up the topic of police, and that is what our police does in our cities. We as policymakers are accountable to what we fund and invest in. There's a growing national concern about how we utilize police resources to address public safety. And when something goes wrong, often this body and other individuals tend to blame the rogue, perhaps even racist officer, and wash our hands of our responsibilities. Yet every year we vote to fund this organization. We fund the arming of our officers. We fund the training program and protocol that determines that shootings and, yes, even homicides are necessary for public safety. This is not to say that this is the wrong conclusion, but let's take accountability for what members of the public are telling us that they are seeing on our streets on a daily basis and respond to it. Is this really the only way that we can make our cities safer? I know every member of this board supports funding many of the things that I've articulated, such as housing and schools. However, you cannot vote for this resolution as written today and really fund all of those other things. Each budgetary commitment is a choice. The more we fund the police, the less we fund housing, schools, and after-school programs. Our budget is a finite number, and with a price tag of $49,525,000, close to $50 million as proposed by this resolution, this is not a small financial commitment. I'm not saying I'm not willing to fund a police increase beyond the charter after a comprehensive discussion, but this resolution is frankly premature. I won't be able to support it today as written. I think that, as Supervisor Avalos mentioned, that we should continue this item and refer it back to committee. If not, I look forward to looking at the amendments that Supervisor Avalos is proposing today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Supervisor Farrell.
Thank you, President Breed. So, colleagues, I want to thank everyone for the discussion, for those who've turned out today. A few things. First of all, in terms of the comment about treating this as a zero-sum game within our budget, yes, our budget process, as we're going through it right now, is a reflection of our shared priorities as a city. I don't accept the premise, though, that you have to fund one thing or the other, or to say I'd be willing to fund X staffing levels but not increase staffing levels, and therefore it makes it okay. To me, that is without a doubt splitting hairs. From my perspective, we need to do both. I appreciate the comments that are not necessarily in the resolution to talk about alternative ways that we need to fund individuals, whether we talk about homeless outreach team, which is a resolution that I sponsored last year and authored to double our homeless outreach team here in San Francisco, or whether we want to do other things and support homeless proposals and funding, which I've done year after year here at the Board of Supervisors. But I don't believe that that means that therefore we should not be looking at increasing our police staffing levels as well. To me, these things are not binary or mutually exclusive. You know, I appreciate the fact that recent incidents around our police department have become very sensitive in the city of San Francisco, and I understand that and appreciate that. Whether it's regarding trust or transparency or other issues, I think this board has been a body that has very much understood that. The chief has understood that, and the police department has understood that, and they're doing everything in their power right now to address those concerns. It doesn't happen overnight, and I don't expect them to. However...
Excuse me. Thank you. Supervisor
However,
Farrell.
as we've talked about things in a motion that I appreciate Supervisor Marr made yesterday at Budget Committee regarding reserving police academy classes until we have additional training, while I voted against that, what I do know on the alternative is that the police chief has already done the training for his entire command staff and is committed to do the rest of the training this entire year. So to say that these efforts are either disingenuous or not happening or are simply a response to the community without being truly what the police department intends to do, to me, is absolutely wrong. And I know that everyone here at the board is committed to improving our police department, as our police officers are, and they have what I think is one of the hardest jobs here in the city of San Francisco. But what I will say is this, though. The number one thing that I hear, and I will say this very clearly, not just in my district, everywhere that I go in the city of San Francisco is around police staffing levels in our public safety departments. It is something where every single one of the members of this Board of Supervisors asked the police chief for additional police officers. I hear it time and time again from neighborhood groups, from residents, from emails.
Excuse me. If members of the public can't sit in the gallery in quiet, then I'm going to need to ask you to leave.
And time again, we see public safety as one of the top concerns, if not the number one concern here in the city of San Francisco. And again, we might have a difference of opinion on how to approach it, but we all agree that this is a major issue. And again, from my perspective, we need to be able to approach it in multiple ways. It's not one way or the other, it's both. And I do believe that the public demands and expects public safety to be one of the top, if not the top priority of the city of San Francisco and our government, and we need to approach it that way. Historically, we have been understaffed as a police department, where over the last 10 years, we've seen an increase of population, as has been talked about. We've all over 12% in the last 10 years. We've seen a decrease in our police staffing levels of about 3%. And we can talk about the reasons behind it. I also I applaud the fact that this year violent crime is down. I think everybody in this entire chambers does. But I will not for a second diminish the seriousness of the property crimes that are happening here in the city of San Francisco. Up in the high double digits in most of our districts. From my perspective, this is a serious issue and an issue, again, across the city of San Francisco we hear about as members of the Board of Supervisors. And I refuse to brush those things off or say that they are not serious crimes that we need to address. And again, we can talk about the reasons behind it, but from my perspective, to suggest that additional police officers is not going to help that situation, to me, is completely wrong. I also do believe that when people commit crimes, we need to have consequences in order to prevent them from happening into the future. This board, this administration, and I applaud Mayor Lee for fully funding the 5 police academy classes this year and committing to full staffing levels in the future, has completely made a commitment to make sure our police staffing levels are where there should be. However, the current staffing levels were proposed at a time where a city looked a lot different than it does today and a population level that's quite a bit smaller. I have been deeply committed and fought for the additional funding for new police academy classes, and I will continue to do so into the future. I want to give the men and women of our police department, as well as the residents of San Francisco, everything they need to enhance public safety citywide, and know that we as a board and as a city, we will hold them accountable. But I do believe that this resolution is absolutely necessary going forward.
Thank you, Supervisor Farrell. Supervisor Marr.
Yeah, thank you. I'm in total disagreement with my colleagues, Supervisor Farrell, Weiner, and Cohen. Every day we're getting these new reports, this one from the Hayward Burns Institute on San Francisco's racism and ethnic disparities, and from CJ Criminal and Social Justice Organization, from our Public Defenders Racial Justice Committee. This is not an appropriate way to look at keeping our communities safe, though I know that Supervisor Weiner mentioned that that's his approach. I wanted to speak in strong respect to the many people that have come out from the Mission District again and again to these chambers, from the Bayview and the Fillmore and others, and all the other communities that are out here. As my colleagues mentioned, 283 more police are not going to make our communities safer. It's alternatives to incarceration, community-based programs, youth programs that many people from our chambers work in. How we address the killings of Amilcar Perez Lopez, Alex Nieto, and others is really a critical part of what we do as a board. Supervisor Avalos's amendments are a multi-pronged, multidisciplinary approach to looking at how we make our communities safer with communities as resources, not just more police officers. I think the politics that were brought up here earlier of the need for more housing and the human safety net are critical. There is a correlation when politics bring up the need for more police and funding of law enforcement versus funding our communities. The push out of Latinos and Chicano people from the Mission District, historically of African Americans from the Fillmore and other neighborhoods, is totally connected to what's going on today with this this mean-spirited piece of legislation. I think the Avalos amendments are in line with making sure that we represent San Francisco values that respect the communities as we try to make our people and our communities safer. So please support the Avalos amendments. Thank you.
Supervisor Campos.
Thank you, Madam President. And let me say that I respect every one that has spoken on this issue, and I understand that people feel very passionate about this issue, but I do think it's important for us to listen to one another, because I think that there is a lot to be learned from all sides here. I served on the Police Commission. I think I'm the only member of this Board of Supervisors that served on the Police Commission. And the one thing that I would say on the issue of policing, I really believe that it is critical for this body, the Board of Supervisors, to be as unified as we can be when it comes to issues around policing. Whether you're talking about staffing, whether you're talking about training, whether you're talking about recruitment, I think it's really important for us to speak with one voice. And I would ask the authors of this resolution, who I know feel very passionately about this, to please reconsider moving forward with this item. I really believe that it would be a mistake and a disservice, quite frankly, to the police department and the communities that it serves, for us to move forward a resolution on police staffing where the Board of Supervisors is divided. I really believe, and if you could please hear me out, I really believe that to achieve what I know the police commission, the chief of police, community members have said is needed in San Francisco, we need to have as unified a front as possible. And what I can tell you is this, that I think that the symbol of this Board of Supervisors moving forward this resolution is going to send the wrong message to many communities. So much has been happening around the police department in the last few months. And this Board of Supervisors has been silent on those issues. The one effort by Supervisor Avalos to make a statement about the need for reform was actually not successful. It was actually sent back to committee. And I actually think that many people felt hurt by that decision. And while I respect the reasoning behind it, I think that in the context of that action, for the Board of Supervisors to act, and the first thing that we do as a board when it comes to policing is to pass a resolution that deals with staffing but doesn't address all the other issues that have come up, I think it's a mistake. And I actually think that in the end it's going to do more harm to the police department and its relationship with these communities than it helps. And I will say that I think that there's common ground for us to have here, but I don't believe that moving this forward is the right decision. And I say this as someone who has worked with the police department for many years. As a member of the police commission, I came to this Board of Supervisors advocating for more staffing for the police department. And one of the reasons that we were able to reach that 1971 goal is because people like me and others on the police commission came to this body and said, we as members of the police commission who know where staffing is believe that this is needed. But I have spoken to members of this police commission right now who have said that they did not even know that this was happening, that they were not even consulted on whether or not this was the right move. And so I really think it's a mistake. And so before I talk about the merits of what is being presented, I would simply ask the authors of this resolution to please don't move forward. Send this back to committee, continue it, whatever we can, so that we can have a dialogue that includes everyone. I would encourage the mayor's office, because I know that the mayor cares about the relationship between police and the communities that it serves, especially communities of color. Mr. Mayor, you have the ability to step in and say that this is not how we're going to address policing issues as a city. We want to be united, and we're not going to let something that, as strongly as people feel, in the end will be divisive. So that would be my ask, and so I would make a motion in that spirit to send this item back to committee so that we can have enough time to have this discussion and conversation.
Supervisor Campos has made a motion to send this item back to committee, seconded by Supervisor Avalos. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
On the motion to send item 23 back to committee, Supervisor Wiener?
No.
Wiener, no. Supervisor Yee?
Yes.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos?
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed?
No.
Breed, no. Supervisor Campos?
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen?
No.
Christensen, no. Supervisor Cohen?
No.
Cohen, no. Supervisor Farrell?
No.
Farrell, no. Supervisor Kim?
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr?
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang?
No.
Tang, no. There are 4 ayes and 7 noes, with the noes being Supervisor Wiener, Supervisor Breed, Campos, Christensen, Cohen, Farrell, and Tang.
The motion to send this item back to committee fails. Supervisor Yee.
Thank you, President Bree. So it is true that most of us, if not, well, most of us would like to see the increase in police officers on our streets and so forth, and most of us will be supporting it to get up to the 1971. I mean, I certainly support it, and I'm going to be supporting what the Mayor Lee has suggested in terms of having 5 classes for the next year. And to be truthful, walking into this chamber, I was willing to look at some numbers beyond 1971. What I wasn't prepared to do was, and it's completely my fault for thinking something else, the resolution that's being presented, what I thought I was going to be supporting was the notion that we need to look at something beyond 1971. We need to look at it for a variety of reasons. And the main reason was to look at the population. But what happened is that when I looked at it more carefully, it seems like population seems to be the sole determining factor here. And that it's already determined that what the number is. And I feel like I need to have more of a discussion. I need to be more involved with this. It's really important. But at the same time, I want to honor what people have, what our past Board of Supervisors have determined, and probably went through a lot of dialogue to get to the 1971 that includes the community and so forth. So in my mind, the process that I was going to come in here to support was to look at increasing it, but so the results are possibly the same, but the pathway is a little bit different. I wanted to have dialogue. I wanted the police commission to be involved. I wanted the community to be involved. I wanted myself to be a little more involved in the dialogue. I haven't really had a chance to do much of this dialogue. So, things like the population is really important. Of course, that should be a determining factor. But like everything, like many things, it's not always proportional to a number. Sometimes you need a baseline, a number of police officers or whatever the category of services you're talking about. You need a minimum amount. Then you after the baseline, then you might base it on population. So I don't know where these numbers came from. We have to look at job duties. People have mentioned that already. What are we doing here in San Francisco that's different from other places? So you have to look at that carefully rather than just comparing strict numbers. And then the other thing that has been brought up, whether it's from the community or individuals here, the way I would look at it is the factor that we really need to look at is what does our prevention programs look like compared to other places? Are we more effective or less effective? And that should be a big factor in whether we need more officers or not. Yes, there's a lot of things that isn't being taken care of. I mean, I would like to see more traffic officers out there, for instance, to give people tickets that are breaking the laws so that people don't die from the street unnecessarily. I would love to see more officers respond quicker to petty theft. I would love to see more police officers to deal with our human trafficking issues in San Francisco. I mean, that is something that we haven't even mentioned. Well, we are going to get more officers, and we're going to ramp up in the next 2 years to the 1971. And we need to look at it, and we need to figure it out, not the way I feel very uncomfortable to just say, here's the number, please accept it, and that's what it is going to be. I need to have a discussion. I need us to look at it, back up a little bit, and look at what we really need after we add more officers and take these other factors into consideration. I think it's really important that we support our police department to have the necessary people there, and at the same time, we want to make it as efficient as possible, and be bringing in officers that are going to meet the needs of San Francisco, that's sensitive to the people in San Francisco, to understand diversity here. Those are important to me. So for me, after I've thought about it, thank you for this discussion that we're having, colleague. I mean, I really do appreciate it. I didn't come in here with any determined notion of how I was going to do this, But after this discussion, it made me think a little bit more, and that's why I'm saying all the things I'm saying. So I won't be supporting the current resolution at this point. I want us to have a discussion.
President Breed.
Thank you. Colleagues, I have a set of friendly amendments to this resolution, which I hopefully will be accepted by the authors. I'm fully supportive of increased police staffing, and I've helped push for new academy classes, not only this year, but the last 2 years since I've been on the board. The 1971 officer minimum, even if we were meeting it today, it's outdated and it's too low. I hear almost every day from merchants in the Haight who want more police officers, from folks in the Inner Sunset and Coal Valley, as well as residents of public housing where I grew up who want to see more police officers patrolling their neighborhood. Providing for public safety is one of our most important jobs here, and we have whole new neighborhoods, and we're adding 10,000 people a year, and every other major department, the MTA, the airport, the PUC is planning for the future, and we need to do the same with our public safety places. We need more officers, and I want to thank Supervisor Wiener and Cohen for bringing this resolution forward. My amendments, which I passed around, do 4 things. I think it's important to add police staffing based on what other peer cities do. I know the controller's report that was issued cited other cities having roughly 271 officers per 100,000 residents, meaning we would need another 2,279 officers to meet that average. The amendments acknowledge the recently reinstated Cadet Academy, which trains local high school graduates for police jobs and encourages the chief to prioritize these cadets for hiring. One of the commitments I made when I came into office is to make sure that access to jobs in the police department were made to my community. My cousin talked about an incident where he was stopped by the police, he was slammed on the police car, he went to his dad, he told his dad about the situation, and his dad said to him, well, why don't you become a police officer? And his response was, I don't think I could ever get into the department. This cadet program is a pipeline to make sure that young people in our community, have access to be police officers. We can't just point our fingers out to police. We have to be a part of the solution as well. The amendments also put the board on record as supporting extensive racial bias and the amendments put the board on record. The
ancestors are ashamed of you. Your ancestors are screaming out,
the amendments put the third thing that the amendments do is put the board on record as supporting extensive anti-bias training for all officers. Finally, my amendments encourage other public safety strategies such as increasing in the San Francisco Police and Sheriff Department and leveraging the use of those departments for transfers and other things that can be performed by other public safety officials. Colleagues, thank you for your support. I'm sure you guys got a copy of the amendments, and I would hope that you would support them.
So we have a motion by President Breed. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Wiener. Comments, colleagues? Supervisor Avalos.
To the amendments?
Yes.
These are comments to the amendments. I was proposing an amendment of the whole, so it's kind of hard to support the underlying resolution. And then when it comes to the amendments that are being offered by President Breed, there's there's a couple that I couldn't accept at all because I think they're based on false assumptions or assumptions that haven't been established as fact, but more opinion, which I think this whole resolution as it stands is one that is based on opinion rather than fact, rather than what is very commonly understood with various studies in various places within our justice system around the country. So I have a real difficult time accepting these amendments, although there are two that I feel like I could accept, the one about the cadets and the one about extensive bias training. The last one on page 3, if we were to change that to say, in addition to exploring police staffing levels rather than increasing police staffing levels, I could accept that amendment. But the ones that say, in order to meet the average level of police services, the San Francisco would need 2,279 police officers, that to me I don't agree with at all. And to put an opinion like that before me to support is really challenging me to give any credence to whether this is actually a resolution that really works in any way. I did have some reactions to some of the comments that had been made as well. The 1971 number, we don't know whether that's outdated or not. I think that's an opinion, whether it's outdated or not. We have only been at the 1971 level in 2009, and I've been working at City Hall for 10 years, and before that, I don't think we ever reached that number. And in 2009, we actually had a robust policing program that I saw in my district that I thought was an adequate level that we needed to have. What I see is that if we're pushing to have more police officers as a response solely based on population growth, then we're really out of touch with everyday San Franciscans. We are not really in touch with what people's experiences with the police department truly are. And I'm not going to say that I'm fully in touch with all of San Francisco either. I can't claim to be, but I'll tell you this. I am in touch with a lot of people, including the police captains in my district, who say they need more police officers. I hear them say that. And I also hear a lot of people in the community who want that. And you know what? I've actually been responsive to that. I am supporting 8 academy classes moving forward to get us to the 1971 level. That's probably not going to be very popular with people who are here in the audience today, but that's something that I believe is my responsibility as a supervisor, is to make sure that we reach our Constitution, city charter level of policing that the voters have mandated. And we're far below that. So when we're talking about adding police officers, I can accept that up to a certain number, but to say that we need to add police officers while we're doing it and saying we need to get 283 more police officers to get to the 2,200 number makes absolutely no sense. It's absurd. There's been no effort to reach out to the police commission on this. There's been no discussion among other city departments that this is the right approach to take. It's a singular point of view that's coming from possibly our police captains, our police chief, the police department itself, without consultation with other departments who will suffer because we're putting all of our money here rather than other places. There are real choices that we're making about these dollars. So I cannot support these amendments. And because we have dueling amendments here, I really think that we should make another effort to send this back to committee where it really should get heard in a way that we actually involve all the city to discuss what our staffing levels should be. We should be exploring how we establish our police staffing levels, not that we're going to make them larger. That makes no sense whatsoever. So I'm on a motion again to send this back to committee, and hopefully we can make the right vote this time.
Okay, Supervisor Avalos has made a motion to send this item by committee, seconded by Supervisor Campos.
Madam President, seconded by Supervisor
Campos.
Campos, thank you. On the motion to send the item back to committee, Supervisor Wiener.
No.
Wiener, no. Supervisor Yee.
Yes.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
No.
Breed, no. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen.
No.
Christensen, no. Supervisor Cohen.
No.
Cohen, no. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, no. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang.
No.
Tang, no. There are 5 ayes and 6 noes, with the noes being Supervisor Wiener, Breed, Christensen, Cohen, Farrell, and Tang.
Okay, the motion to send back to committee fails. Supervisor Weiner.
Thank you.
Supervisor Avalos, just for clarity in your comments, you said that you would be supporting the amendments to support the academy classes as well as the bias training, but not the other two proposed amendments?
I said that I'm okay with those, but in overall, the resolution itself, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Okay, so if we were to separate those, you would be willing to support them on a separate?
If you were to have separate votes in each one of them, I could do that. And then I have other amendments I'd like to make as well.
Okay.
So then I could do those one by one, and we can see how we vote on those.
Okay, great. Thank you. Supervisor Weiner.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you for your amendments, which I do support. First of all, I want to just thank you, colleagues on all sides of this, for all of your remarks and arguments. As I said at the beginning, this is an important issue, and I know there are a lot of different views around it. I think it's really important to understand that no one is suggesting that population is the quote-unquote sole factor in determining the need for increased police staffing.
That's what this resolution says.
First of all, when we compare ourselves to peer cities, it's clear that we need more police staffing. We have new neighborhoods. It's not just about the population growth. But also, and I think we all know this, and Supervisor Avalos admitted this is also about our own observations in the communities that we represent where people do not believe that we have enough police staffing, that we have enough police in our communities to improve neighborhood safety. This is something that we all hear all the time from a broad cross-section of the community. In fact, at Budget Committee the other day, I asked Chief Sir if there was any member of the Board of Supervisors who did not ask him to have more police staffing in their district. If there was even one supervisor who hasn't made that request, and the answer is no. 11 out of 11 members of this Board of Supervisors, being responsive to the communities they represent, have asked for more staffing in their districts. Well, guess what? When you have a limited number of police officers, when you move officers from one area to another area, that original area is going to have less police staffing. The answer is to have adequate police staffing. We're not even close to being there, and we should be looking at the numbers, and we have looked at the numbers, and we need to increase our police staffing goals. I also, I want to respond. I appreciate Supervisor Kim's analysis about the fact that with a smaller police force we have less violent crime. It's true that violent crime is down, and that is because our police department understands that preventing violent crime is job number one for the department. And so we have seen an increased focus on violent crime, and they've done well, but it's been at the expense of enforcement against property crime. It's been at the expense of traffic enforcement. It's at the expense of officers walking beats in neighborhoods. There has been a price to pay for the great work that they have done with inadequate staffing to reduce violent crime. So colleagues, we absolutely we need, and thank you, Supervisor Kim, for acknowledging that we all support increased investment in housing, in education, in health. And as a member of the Budget Committee for the last 5 years, every single year I have advocated for increased investment in all of those areas. And I have been able to, working with colleagues and with the mayor, achieve significant increases in what we invest in the health and the education and the housing of our community. And I'll put my record up against anyone on those areas. But we also need neighborhood safety, and we need more police staffing.
Supervisor Campos.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to ask a couple of questions of our police department, if I may. I see that, I don't know if our chief is
Commander
here.
Ali is here.
So, Deputy Chief Ali.
Oh.
Microphone is on, sir.
Okay. Good afternoon, Supervisors.
Okay. Thank you very much, Deputy Chief. Now, the report by the police, by PERF, which is the research forum that is cited as a basis for the staffing recommendation, and I was actually on the police commission when we asked PERF to come in and do the report. So, one of the things that this report says, which I think is very important, because one of the things, and let me begin by asking you this through the chair, the PERF report basically said that an integral part of any kind of reform or restructuring of police department necessarily has to include better training. And I imagine that the police department, still agrees with that recommendation that PERF provided.
Yes, absolutely.
So this is what the PERF report, and I would encourage you to look at page 24 if you have it, of that report. This is what it says, embedded in is the need for training, but this is the recommendation. The recommendation is create a professional development program to nurture employees and cultivate tomorrow's leaders. Then it says, currently the San Francisco Police Department has no formal career or professional development system. In order to accomplish the portion of the vision relating to employee development, the department should create and implement a formal professional development program. Education, training, experience, and high-quality performances should be key aspects of such a program for all SFPD employees, both sworn and civilian, at all levels, line, supervisory, management, and executive. That's the recommendation from PERF. Has the police department, to your knowledge, created the development program that is called for in the PERF report?
Supervisor, we have a professional development unit assigned to our police academy, and interesting enough, just this morning I addressed a group of police officers both within our department and actually throughout the country. We've had folks from Las Vegas Metro PD, Colorado, teaching a course on Blue Courage, the very foundation of which is an incorporation of one of the points within the 21st century presidential report, and that is to change the mentality and the mindset of police officers from that of warriors to that of guardians, those who have a responsibility to protect and to engage our community from that vantage point. So there's a tremendous, what I'm offering to you is
That's not what I asked. What I asked is, in this report, it said that there was no formal career or professional development system as defined by PERF. So has the police department in San Francisco created that system as defined by PERF in that report?
So unfortunately, you kind of caught me off guard. I do not have that document in front of me to reference the exact verbiage, but what
it's
I will
page 24. I can give you time if you want. I can continue with my points if you want to have an opportunity to look at that portion of the report.
That would be great. And plus, I will add to you that we do. We track training. We provide training on a consistent basis to every level of leadership within the police department, from line officer up until the chief of police. There is mandated training through post. There's supplemental training that we provide regularly to our officers. Yes.
So and do you have confirmation from PERF that in fact you have addressed this recommendation in the report?
What I'm suggesting to you is that we have a professional development training in place. I don't have the exact verbiage in front of me relative to PERF to address that, but to offer in its absence that we do have fundamentally standard training throughout the department, and it's comprehensive.
Well, there's a difference between having some training program and actually doing what PERF said. And the reason I raise this, colleagues, is that if you're basing this staffing recommendation on a PERF report, where the report basically calls into question the training that the SFPD had as of 2008, before you go down the path of hiring more police officers, we should definitely make sure that they have addressed the training that was needed as of 2008 when the report came out. And so, it's a simple question. You either have done it or you haven't. And it's what the report says. So maybe you can look at that.
Supervisor, with all due respect, I do not have the document that you have in front of you. Perhaps if you provide it to me, I can.
It's on the website of the police department. It's page 24 of the PERF report.
All right.
page 24 of the PERF report. Now, the reason I raised that issue is that I think that before we go down the path of saying what the staffing level should be, if it's 2,200 plus officers, that we should make sure that there is the capacity within the San Francisco Police Department to actually train the new officers that are going to come in. You're talking about increasing anywhere from 10 to 20% the staffing levels of a police department. The last thing you want is to bring in new officers and not have the ability to actually properly train those officers. And if you're basing staffing recommendations based on a report by this agency, PERF, then I would imagine that it would be consistent with that to actually look at what the agency is saying about the police department's ability to actually train officers. And in 2008, PERF itself raised those issues. But this is the second point, which I think is very critical, and this is why, while I welcome some of the amendments and will be supporting some of the amendments that have been talked about, I will most emphatically be voting against this resolution because I want to be on record saying that this is a mistake. And I have been on this Board of Supervisors for almost 7 years, and I think that if we go forward with this resolution, which I assume we will, I think that we will look back at that action when it happens. Probably not too long from now, we were going to look back and say that this is one of the worst mistakes that this Board of Supervisors has made. And why do I say that? Because I think that when you have the kinds of issues that have been facing this police department in the last few months, that before you start talking about hiring new police officers, we should be talking about reforming the police department. Imagine what the reaction from the country would have been if the City Council of Ferguson had responded to the incident by saying we want to have more police officers. Yet that's precisely what this Board of Supervisors will do if this moves forward. That instead of talking about the need for reform, we're actually talking about the need to hire more officers. Now, I do believe that San Francisco Police Department is among the better police departments in the country. But the fact that it is doesn't mean that the issues that are facing departments like Ferguson and other departments in the country are not facing this police department as well. And you look at the issue of what happened with the racist and homophobic texts. I would imagine that if the police chief had come out and said nothing's going to happen to those police officers, I would imagine that even this Board of Supervisors would not be talking about hiring more officers, that before we went down that path, we would say we need to address the issue of the texts that are racist and homophobic before we actually hire more officers. And yet something really significant happened with respect to those texts yesterday. Even though our police chief is saying that we should terminate those officers, the San Francisco Superior Court issued an order that basically says that the San Francisco Police Commission, for the time being, has no jurisdiction over those disciplinary cases involving those officers. The court said, we are taking that away from the police department, and we as a court will be the ones who decide a very important question, which is whether or not the police commission and the police department acted on a timely basis in terms of disciplining those officers. And so what does that mean? It means that we may have a situation where the court decides that in fact the police commission did not act in time, and that the police department actually knew months, more than a year, maybe a couple of years, about those texts, but didn't do anything. And what's going to happen is that there is a very real possibility that those officers will be reinstated. That's a possibility. And the mayor's office is shaking their head, but that's precisely what the Superior Court said. They could very well decide that. And so what kind of message do you think it will send to these communities that as a court could very well reinstate these officers. We, on this Board of Supervisors, we're not talking about the need to reform the system to figure out how it is that the police department knew about texts and yet nothing happened. We are talking about hiring more officers. I'm sorry, but that's putting the cart before the horse. Before we go down that path, we need to make sure that we look at this police department and addressing the reforms that are needed. And the fact that the chief of police is saying these officers should be terminated is a good thing. But the problem is that the court is saying that this department did not act appropriately. And the fact that a court is saying that should give us pause. It should give us enough pause to say, let's look at what reforms may be needed before we go down this path. And so I will be supporting some of the amendments, but I will most definitely be voting against this resolution. And I think that if this resolution passes, that we're going to have egg in our face here in City Hall. And I think it's actually sad that that's how we want to approach this. At a minimum, we should be continuing this if we're not going to be sending it back to committee. But I just want to be on the record saying this is not just a mistake, but I think it's one of the gravest mistakes we will have made if we go forward with this.
Supervisor Avalos.
We have amendments, I believe, that I think we could vote on those now,
Okay.
if we could. Would like to go one by one, and then I have an amendment of the whole that I'd like to do.
Okay. So based on the amendments that I proposed, if you look at page 2, lines 16 through 21, those seem to be the items that you have concern with. And if you look at the further resolve clauses on page 3 through lines 18 through 25, and on page 4, lines 1 and 2, it seems as though those are the ones that you're willing to support. So maybe we can, no? Okay.
I'll explain. The first resolve clause, whereas clause, where the 15 peer cities studied in the controls report averaged 271 police officers per 100,000 residents. I believe that's fact. I could support that. The next one that says, whereas in order to meet the average level of police service, San Francisco would need 2,279 officers. That's opinion, and I can't support that. Whereas San Francisco's police staffing goals should reflect its current and future needs, not the needs of the city from 20 years ago. That's an opinion, and I could not support that. Perhaps that we established our 1971 number 20 years ago is a fact, but we should not necessarily think because it did 20 years ago we should reestablish the numbers. We should establish the numbers based on other factors besides how long ago that was. On the first resolve clause, if we were to change it and to say in addition to exploring police staffing levels, the board will look at strategy. So you changing out exploring to from increasing to exploring, and then we get to what I'm proposing in my amendment of the whole is actually not commit to increased staffing levels, but to have a multidisciplinary process to consider establishing staffing levels rather than saying we're going to actually increase staffing levels. That's the difference between my amendment of the whole and what's here. So if we want to go through one by one, I'm happy to vote, but then I'm going to come back with something else that's going to override the whole thing.
Okay. So in that case, we'll take my amendments as in their whole form, and I won't split them up, and then we'll take your amendments. So, Madam Clerk, on the motion to amend.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I believe if I want to request that we split the file to vote on it, that would be a motion that would prevail over actually having a vote on the whole resolution. Is that correct,
So,
Madam Clerk?
through the President to Supervisor Avalos, yes, you can divide certain portions of the amendment out, and we could take them seriatim. Yes.
Okay, I'd like to do that.
Okay.
So, if I could just repeat to you, Supervisor Avalos, what you would like to separate. On page 2, lines 18 through 19 and 20 through 21.
That section I'd like to separate.
You'd like to sever that
those
out?
two whereas clauses,
Okay.
to sever those. And then
on page 3, line 25.
line 24.
24, okay.
I would like to.
So we'll
sever
take
that.
a vote on everything before that, and then a secondary vote on those 3 items. Okay.
Point of information. For each motion, and this is getting confusing, for each motion, will the page and line number be stated for what's being voted on?
I'm happy to do that.
And also, just clarify, this is for President Breed's, President
correct.
Breed's amendments.
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. Madam Clerk, is that clear?
Yes, Madam President.
And then before we get to the very end, I want to offer amendments as well. So before
Okay. So basically, for clarity, Supervisor Avalos has asked to remove lines 18 through 21, as well as line on page 2, and on page 3, line 24, and to remove those and vote on those separately, and then to vote on the rest of the underlying amendments. Is that clear? Okay.
Okay.
Colleagues, can we please call the roll on the items without, do you want that to be repeated?
I think just to be clear, Madam President, if I may suggest a point of information that the clerk state what lines we're voting on in terms of amending into the resolution, just so everyone is clear.
Supervisor Breed has made a motion, seconded by Supervisor Wiener, that the amendments that she supported be voted on. We are severing out for a secondary vote lines 18 through 21 on page 2, and on page 3, line 24. Those items we are removing from this vote, and then we will take a second vote on those items that I've severed.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. So, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen. Aye. Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. There are 11 ayes.
Those amendments pass unanimously. And on the severed amendments, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
And if I may articulate what they are. On page 2, lines 18 through 21, and on page 3, line 24.
Please call the roll.
Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
I'm sorry. I want to make the right vote, so I'm a little confused. I thought we just did that, 18. Oh, okay.
No.
Gotcha. Okay. Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
No.
Avalos, no. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
No.
Campos, no. Supervisor Christensen.
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim.
No.
Kim, no. Supervisor Marr.
No.
Marr, no. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. There are 7 ayes and 4 noes. Supervisor Avalos, Campos, Kim, and Marr voted no.
Okay, those amendments pass. Supervisor Avalos.
We'll motion to duplicate the file. And
You can just make a request to duplicate the file. So it's duplicated.
I'm requested to duplicate the file. Now we have a duplicated file, and one, I'd like to propose an amendment of the whole, and you have a copy of the amendment of the whole on your desks, colleagues, and let me read to you the amendment of the whole. So rather than establishing police staffing levels, we're establishing a multidisciplinary process for determining police staffing levels. And then in the language of the resolution, it says, resolution establishing a Board of Supervisors policy that police staffing levels will be adjusted through a multidisciplinary process involving multiple departments and community stakeholders, and directing the budget and legislative analysts to review public policy best practices for evaluating police staffing levels. Then I have other whereas clauses I've added to the resolution. On page 2, top of page 2, line 1, whereas statistics from the California Department of Justice show that between 1994 and 2013, despite this increase in population, the overall number of crimes in San Francisco have decreased, with violent crimes decreasing by 34.8%, homicides decreasing by 47.2%, robberies decreasing by 36.6%, and property crimes decreasing by 5.3%. And down to line 15 on the same page, whereas the PERF report states that the target for patrol staffing should balance the work that needs to be performed against the resources a jurisdiction has available for patrol services. Next, line 18 is another line I want to add. Whereas the PERF report upper limit recommendation of 2,254 officers was intended to allow officers time for, quote, heavy involvement in community policing and problem solving, especially during prime time, community policing hours from 11 a.m. through 9 p.m., Monday through Thursday. These prime time hours allow officers to attend community meetings, work with community organizations, meet with business people, and contact other government agencies. Then on the line, on page 3, line 9, another whereas clause, whereas the controller report found that San Francisco has 0.14 civilians for every one sworn officer, which is less than half the national average for cities with populations over 350,000. And whereas in comparison with peer cities, San Francisco was found to have a slightly lower number of high priority calls for service per sworn office, and San Francisco's violent crime rate falls in the middle of its peers and is only slightly above the national average for cities with populations over 350,000. And then I have one other page which has a lot of, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it talks about the International Association of Chiefs of Police, their report around patrol staffing and deployment study, and talks about ratios such as population-based should not be what determines what police staffing levels should be. Then I discussed the Department of Justice's community-oriented policing that the state of Michigan, Michigan State University had done, that also detaches per capita from the levels of actual effectiveness in stopping crime, and report other issues of how we respond. So those are the amendments of the whole. I'd like to, there's also some on the resolve clauses that instead of actually committing to a higher staffing level, that we request our budget analysts to do, to study what are the different approaches that staffing levels for police departments are done around the country, what are best practices around that, and that we should consider that before deciding what our staffing level should be, which makes much more sense than using all these opinions about and anecdotal evidence about what makes a neighborhood or a city safe and what the proper level of staffing should be. Those are that's the amendment of the whole that I'd like to create with the duplicate file and send that to committee.
Okay, Supervisor Avalos has made a motion to amend the duplicated file, seconded by Supervisor Campos. Supervisor Campos.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, I just want to make a very important point, which I apologize that I failed to mention in my earlier remarks. And I think it's really important for the public to know this, because while I think that it's true that some people raise the issue of staffing, I think that one of the things that people don't know, which I think it's important for the members of the public to keep in mind, is that San Francisco is not doing very well in terms of the number of police officers that are actually patrolling the streets, as opposed to police officers who are sitting behind a desk and are doing a job that should be done by a civilian. I think that people do want staffing, but I also think that people want to make sure that police officers are out patrolling the streets, not sitting behind a desk. So let me give you the numbers that this PERF report that is cited had. San Francisco, when the PERF report was issued in 2008, had 2,130 officers, and that was the size of the agency that was reported by PERF. And San Francisco had 231 civilians. Interestingly enough, you look at a department like Boston that had 2,170 police officers at the time, very similar numbers as San Francisco. Boston actually had 640 civilians, 3 times more than San Francisco had, which means that they actually had civilians doing the work that should be done by civilians. To the contrary, here you had police officers sitting behind a desk at a higher proportion than Boston. If you look actually at Seattle, by the way, had a staffing of 1,273, actually about half of what San Francisco's staffing was. And Seattle had 502 civilian employees in 2008. Actually, twice the number of civilian employees that San Francisco had. You look at Baltimore. 2,900 officers, 721 civilians. Again, just a few officers more than San Francisco, but 3 times the number of civilians. The reason I say that is that I think it's important for members of the public in San Francisco to know that we're talking about hiring more police officers when we haven't done a good enough job of actually making sure that the officers we do have, that those officers are patrolling the streets, not sitting behind a desk. I think that if the public knows that, I think that a lot of the same people that are saying more staffing are also going to say, but before you do more staffing, can you make sure that police officers are actually patrolling the streets, not sitting behind a desk?
Okay. With that, colleagues, Supervisor Avalos.
Just to clarify the motion, so it's a duplicate file that for the duplicate file we do an amendment of the whole and send to committee, and I want to specify it goes to the Public Safety Committee.
Okay, thank you. Okay, on the duplicated file as amended to send to committee.
No. Madam President, we would have to take a roll call vote on the amendment of the whole offered by Supervisor Avalos.
Okay. So, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
On the amendment offered by Supervisor Avalos, first, Supervisor Wiener.
No.
Wiener, no. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
No.
Breed, no. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen.
No.
Christensen, no. Supervisor Cohen.
No.
Cohen, no. Supervisor Farrell.
No.
Farrell, no. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang.
No.
Tang, no. There are 5 ayes and 6 noes. Supervisor Wiener, Breed, Christensen, Cohen, Farrell, and Tang voted no.
The amendment fails.
Would like to motion that the item goes to
Committee.
Public Safety, duplicated file goes to Public Safety Committee.
Okay. Roll call vote.
On the motion to send it to committee.
Oh, I'm sorry. I need a second. Seconded by Supervisor Campos.
Okay.
Roll call vote.
Supervisor Wiener.
No.
Wiener, no. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
No.
Breed, no. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen.
No.
Christensen, no. Supervisor Cohen.
No.
Cohen, no. Supervisor Farrell.
Nope.
Farrell, no. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang.
No.
Tang, no. There are 5 ayes, 6 noes, with Supervisors Wiener, Breed, Christensen, Cohen, Farrell, and Tang voting no.
Okay. The motion to send the item to committee fails. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll on the item as amended?
On item 23, as amended, Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
No.
Yee, no. Supervisor Avalos.
No.
Avalos, no. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
No.
Campos, no. Supervisor Christensen.
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Can you hold?
Cohen, no. Supervisor
Madam Clerk,
Farrell.
I can't hear.
Going no?
Supervisor Kim. Supervisor Kim.
Kim is not voting. He won't vote. Recess while we clear the room.
SF Gov TV, San Francisco Government Television.
All right, we left off at the vote, and we were at Supervisor Christensen.
Supervisor Christensen said aye.
Okay.
Supervisor Cohen?
Thank you. Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell?
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim?
No.
Kim, no. Supervisor Marr? Supervisor Marr, my apologies.
No.
Marr, no. Supervisor Tang?
Aye.
Tang, aye. There are 6 ayes and 5 noes, with Supervisors Yee, Avalos, Campos, Kim, and Marr in the dissent.
Okay. The resolution is adopted as amended. Madam Clerk, can you please call the next item?
Item 24 is an ordinance to amend the Administrative Code to establish the Cannabis State Legalization Task Force to advise the Board of Supervisors, the Mayor, and City Departments regarding the local impacts of possible state legislation legalizing adult use of cannabis and setting forth the membership and the duties of the task force.
Supervisor Weiner.
Okay, colleagues. Today before us is legislation to create the Cannabis State Legalization Task Force. I want to thank my co-sponsors, Supervisor Kim. I want to thank my co-sponsors, Supervisor Kim and Supervisor Marr, for joining me in this legislation, as well as Jeff Cretan in my office for his hard work on it. We have seen cannabis legalization efforts succeed in other states, and it's very likely that 2016 will bring legalized cannabis to California. Several statewide advocacy groups are working on initiatives now, and some have even submitted ballot language. If this passes, and it very well may, San Francisco will be at the epicenter of this change. We need to take a smart and thoughtful policy approach to what these new laws will mean for our city. If we don't formulate policies in advance of legalization, we will end up having a chaotic fire drill after legalization occurs. The Cannabis State Legalization Task Force will bring together residents, advocates, businesses, and government leaders to identify the key policy issues we need to start planning for now. It will be a 22-member cannabis task force with representatives as described in the legislation from various sectors to really provide strong feedback and various perspectives about how we need to plan for this likely change. The term of the task force, the goal is for it to commence this fall and for the task force to report back to the Board of Supervisors in 1 year on the legal, social, land use, and enforcement issues that we are likely to have to address. The task force will take no official position on legalization, but instead will be focused on policy and administrative solutions. Colleagues, this is an important effort to plan ahead for a significant change in state law, and I ask for your support. I do want to offer minor amendments that Supervisor Kim and I drafted today that will simply clarify that for the 2 seats reserved for cannabis consumers, that they need to have at least 2 years of experience in cannabis-related advocacy. So we've distributed those minor amendments, and I move that we adopt those amendments.
Supervisor Weiner has made a motion to amend, seconded by Supervisor Kim. Colleagues, can we take those amendments without objection? Without objection, those amendments pass.
And through the chair, Madam President, I believe this resorts it back to a first reading as amended if the item passes today.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, but it's on the first reading.
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay, can you please call the roll?
On item 24 as amended, Supervisor Weiner.
Aye.
Weiner, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos. Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen.
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. There are 11 ayes.
Okay, this ordinance is passed as amended unanimously on the first reading. Madam Clerk, we're going to skip over our regular business and go to our 3 p.m. special order. Can you please read items 26 and 27?
Items 26 and 27 comprise the special order at 3 p.m. On the motion approved on June 16, 2015, the Board of Supervisors will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole for the purpose of a public hearing to consider objections to a report of assessment costs contained in the resolution, the subject matter of item 27, approving a report of assessment costs for inspection and or repair of blighted properties ordered through the Accelerated Sidewalk Abatement Program, costs which are to be paid out of the Blight Abatement Fund.
Colleagues, today's Committee of the Whole is being conducted to hear public testimony on a report of assessment costs submitted by the Director of Public Works for inspection and or repair of blighted properties through the Accelerated Sidewalk Abatement Program. So at this time, we will open this public hearing. Mr. Kwan, welcome back.
Thank you. This report is for the properties inspected and notified and repairs made and invoiced by the city under the Accelerated Sidewalk Abatement Program from April 2014 through April 2015. During that period, the department inspected and or caused to repair sidewalks and curbs fronting public and private properties throughout the city in response to delinquent notifications, issued in response to service requests received by the city attorney's office, the mayor's office of disability, other public agencies, and citizens, issuing 28 notices of violation and abatement orders, and 176 notifications in regards to public properties that were blighted at a cost of $23,478 for blighted properties, and also $506,304 for blighted public properties, for a total of $530,052.08. 20 invoices were sent out to property owners, of which four invoices were paid, allowing the city to recover $5,314.50. The balance of the property owners elected to have the cost of the sidewalk repairs placed on their property tax or otherwise had not paid the city in a timely manner. In this report, we are submitting 13 properties with outstanding invoices totaling $10,002.08 to be placed as an assessment on the property tax rolls. 6 properties were removed from the list for payments received or to be received, and 1 property was removed for staff to work with the property owners to resolve outstanding issues. This completes my report.
Thank you very much. And at this time, we will open it up for public comment for those members of the public who like to speak on this item. And just for clarity, there will be an opportunity to meet with the Department of Public Works inspector after the hearing and public comment has been heard in order to address your individual case. First member of the public. And just for clarity, this is not general public comment. Thank you.
I'd just like to see you fix up the sidewalk, supervisor, woman and man, the best that you can. Fix it up the sidewalks, fix it the best that you can. Fix it up great, we can hardly wait. Fix up the sidewalk, woman, supervisor, and man. Fix it up the sidewalk if you can. Won't you do it, woman and man, so we'll be safe the best that you can. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Rob. I live here in the city 26 years, and it's a lovely city we live in. I don't want to get negative or anything, but half the cars in the city are texting all the time, which is unfortunate. Listen to Pandora, but our bike riders, which is really dangerous. It's like,
sir, I'm sorry, this is not general public comment. This is comment about the hearing regarding sidewalk repairs, specifically not general public comment. I'm sorry.
I see. Okay, when can we do that? Sure.
That's going to be later on. We're going to have to hold this hearing, and then we just have a few more items.
Oh, okay. All right,
okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak on this item? Seeing none.
Just a quick comment. David Elliott Lewis, 31-year resident of this city, and someone who's tripped way too many times on our poorly maintained sidewalks. So anything you can do to allocate some city funds to sidewalk maintenance would help me as a pedestrian. I'm not a car owner. I'm a walker. I don't even use Muni. I walk and I trip. And we need investment in this vital infrastructure. It's been neglected for too many years. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Next speaker, please.
Tom Gilberti, when we address the sidewalks, please, the smallest percentage of rain runoff slant to the sidewalk, us wheelchair people would appreciate. because the slant that you need to have the drops of water run off the sidewalk into the gutter means that when you push a wheelchair, you're pushing with one arm against that slant the entire time. So if it's a long block, it's a long block. The smallest we can make that angle, that percentage of runoff, one of my arms would really appreciate it. I'm sure there's a few other people that would appreciate it also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak on this item at this time? Seeing none, public comment is closed. And if there are any members of the public who came for this item specifically and would like Mr. Kwan to address their issue individually, he'll step outside the hall and meet with you and then come back with a final verdict on your case. So he'll be right outside. Mr. Kwan, if you and any other members of your team are here?
It's just me today.
Okay, so if you could step outside and meet with individuals, that would be helpful. Thank you. Okay, colleagues, at this time, we will return to our agenda and get back to that item at a later time. Madam Clerk, can you please call item number 25?
Item 25 is a motion to appoint Mia Too Much Satya, Maria Waters, Anwar Mohammed, Allison Lee Suzuki with a residency requirement waiver, and Rob Gittin, terms yet to be determined, to the Children, Youth, and Their Families Oversight and Advisory Committee.
Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you, President Breed. Colleagues, I want to thank my committee members and Rules Committee for their work on this motion and the number of people who are moving forward for the Oversight Committee for DCYF. This committee was set up with trailing legislation for the Charter Amendment, Prop C, that reauthorized the Children's Fund, and PEEF. I'm excited about this new body. Actually, I served on the equivalent of it before when it was called the Citizens Advisory Committee. I was one of the members of it when it first began back in 2001. In writing this legislation and the criteria for these 11 seats, we looked at creating a diverse body that represents many voices in San Francisco. We also wanted to be sure that we had the best committee members with the least conflict of interest. We heard from the Community Coalition that worked to establish the new Children's Fund, that this was a priority for them as well. And we are pleased with the candidates for the committee, especially recommending for seats 7, 8, 9, and 11. They represent a great breadth of knowledge and experience in early childhood education, transitional age youth issues, parent voices, and TAY voices. But in the process, while working on these appointments, we found that there was a member, and it's really hard because one of the members, Allison Lee Suzuki, who has a tremendous talent and experience in the early childhood education field. She works at Wu Yi. She is bilingual Cantonese, and we want to make sure that we are having the broadest representation on this committee as possible. She would be the only Chinese member, I believe, that would be on there, but she is actually, according to the city attorney and the legislation that we have creating this oversight body, that she is not eligible because she receives funding through DCYF that comes through First Five. We had anticipated that this could happen in the Rules Committee. We talked about that this was a tentative assignment. We were really hoping that we could actually, that she could actually retain this seat, but it appears that is not the case. So I have to make a motion on the motion for this body is to strike out her name. And also striking out, that's on page 1, line 1, is striking out her name, and also on the same page, lines 3 through 4, is striking out the residency requirement that's being waived. And then on page 2, lines 3 through 6, by striking the entire paragraph out that starts Allison Lee Suzuki and ends with term yet to be determined. And then on page 2, line 10 through page 3, line 7, by striking out the entire residency requirement waiver. This is not something I'm really happy about doing. I believe that Ms. Lee Suzuki is a very, very qualified person in terms of her experience, but because of the language that we have that was built into the ordinance to make sure that no one who's part of a staff of an organization receiving funds from DCYF could serve on the committee, we wanted to make sure that that language is retained in the assignments of people for the committee itself. And that is actually a legal
requirement. So we would have to send that to take her name off. And I would like to send this one seat, move the rest of the motion forward, but send this one seat back to committee where it will be heard with the seats that the mayor is going to be proposing, and then we can look at, along with the names and people that the mayor has presented, we can consider someone for this remaining seat from the Board of Supervisors that can assure that we're getting the kind of diversity and representation that we want on this committee. Ideally, we're going to have someone who's going to be a native Cantonese speaker, who's Chinese. We also need representation from someone who's Spanish speaking as well. So there's still work to be done on that. So that would be my motion, to change the language on this motion and to send this one seat back to committee.
Okay, Supervisor Avalos has made a motion to strike completely the seat 10 and return that item back to committee for recommendation. Do we have a second? Seconded by Supervisor Marr. Can we take the amendment without objection? Without objection, the amendment passes. And on the item 25, is there anything else for that item? Okay. So.
Just want to thank again my colleagues on Rules Committee for their work on looking at all the candidates and vetting them, and we've done a really good job on that, I believe.
All right. Thank you, Supervisor Avalos. Colleagues, can we take item 25 as amended? Same house, same call. Without objection, this motion is approved unanimously as amended. Madam Clerk, can we return? Is DPW ready? We're going to return to our 3 p.m. special order and hear from Mr. Kwan from DPW.
Thank you, Madam President. I went out to the chambers to wait for anyone who wished to take issue with our list, and seeing no one, I ask that the list be approved.
Okay. Colleagues, do we have a motion to approve the blighted properties list? Motioned by Supervisor Yee, seconded by Supervisor Tang. Colleagues, can we do this without objection? Without objection, this item passes. Madam Clerk, let's go to the next item, please.
Thank you.
Items 26 and 20, pardon me, Madam President. Items 28 and 29 were considered by the Budget and Finance Subcommittee at a regular meeting on Monday, June 22nd, and were forwarded as committee reports. Item 28 was recommended with a new title. It's a resolution designating the examiner for the period of July 1st through December 31st, 2015, and the Chronicle for the period of January 1st through June 30th, 2016, to be the official newspapers of the City and County of San Francisco for all the official advertising for fiscal years 2015 through 16.
Okay, colleagues, can we take these items? Same house, same call.
Madam President, I did not read item 29.
Okay.
Item 29, resolution to designate the following newspapers to be the outreach newspapers of the City and County of San Francisco for the placement of outreach advertising for the fiscal year 2015 through 16 for the following communities: the Small Business Exchange for the African American community, the Bay Area Reporter for the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community, the Tsingtao Daily and the World Journal for the Chinese community, the SF Weekly for the African American, Chinese, Hispanic, and lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender communities, the Central City Extra for the Central City neighborhood, the Jasmine Blue Media Marina for the Northern San Francisco neighborhood, and the Potrero View for the Potrero Hill, Dogpatch, Bayview, Soma, Mission Bay neighborhoods.
Colleagues, can we take these items? Same house, same call. Without objection, these resolutions are adopted unanimously. Madam Clerk, can we go to roll call for introductions?
Yes, Madam President, Supervisor Wiener is the first supervisor to introduce new business.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, I just have one item today, which I think is good news that I think everyone should be happy about. For many, many years, we've had a recurring issue in San Francisco that we have all heard about, where people who have their cars stolen and dumped in San Francisco, often it takes a while for them to even find out where their cars are. They only get a 4-hour grace period in terms of waived storage fees by auto return, and then they end up having to pay significant, not just towing fees, but storage fees that can sometimes be worth more than the vehicle itself, and so they end up just forfeiting the vehicle. It produces huge hardship, and it's been one of those things that has been hanging out there for a long time and has caused harm to a lot of people. Auto return's contract expires at the end of July, and the MTA is going out, has issued an RFP. The MTA has requested, and I am sponsoring, an 8-month extension of the current contract, but there will be a revision. The MTA is going to revise its fees in connection with this extension to, instead of providing a 4-hour grace period for people to retrieve their stolen towed cars, residents will receive 48 hours and non-residents will receive 24 hours. So it will be a significant increase in terms of giving people the ability to get their cars without having to pay storage fees. In addition, the towing and MTA administrative fee will be waived for residents and cut in half for non-residents. So this is, I think, a significant step forward in terms of something that is just unfair. If your car has been stolen, you've been victimized, and then to show up to get your car back when you did nothing wrong and to be told you have to pay hundreds or thousands of dollars is just unfair. The MTA is, of course, balancing its own financial situation, and so there are always trade-offs and costs. But this is a step definitely in the right direction and will set a precedent for the permanent or the longer-term contract that will come to us next year. So today I'm introducing the resolution to extend the auto return contract, and as part of that, the MTA will be revising its fees. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wiener. Supervisor Yee.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, earlier this year, I requested from the Budget and Legislative Analyst's Office about the potential of installing vehicle telematics, or AKA black boxes, across our city fleet. The initial motivation behind the study was to assess whether or not equipping our city's vehicle with black boxes can improve the driving behavior of our city workers. The city paid out $76.9 million in settlements and judgments over the past 5 years. The report highlighted the many advantages of the installation of black boxes, including fuel efficiency, better fleet management, and increased ability to address unsafe driving practices. This technology has also proven cost savings in other cities that have adopted such a program. The city of Sacramento, for instance, reported $60,000 in fuel savings in just the first month after installing a system in 184 of its vehicles. In the Eastern Municipal Water District in Riverside County, the employees drove 165,000 fewer miles and saved $354,000 in the first 6 months. Our city currently has black boxes installed in 2,332 vehicles with plans for 776 more. However, there are 4,733 remaining vehicles in the fleet that currently do not require installation. Therefore, today I am asking the city attorney to work with my office to mandate the installation of black boxes across our city fleet and to develop a program that offers robust data analysis for departments to maximize efficiency. This effort falls clearly into two of the main issues I have been spearheading since taking office. One of them being Vision Zero, the effort to increase pedestrian safety and eliminate deaths on our streets by 2024, and increase efficiency by using our city funds in a smart, effective manner to help us in savings in the long run. This legislation mandates the installation of black boxes in every vehicle by January 1st, 2017. The city administrators will monitor the system and utilize the data collected to enact cost efficiencies and use automation. I want to make sure that the Board of Supervisors will be part of that conversation, and the legislation requires an annual report to be submitted to the board. There's some overlap between what Supervisor Farrell spoke of today And I believe that this will just strengthen his the effort that he's looking at. So I want to I want to thank my staff who has worked on this for the last few months, Matthias Mormino, and I also want to thank my co-sponsors in this, Supervisors Avalos, Supervisor Kim, and the other item, I just want to say real quickly that I like to send my condolences out to the 9 victims of the massacre at Charleston, North Carolina, I think it is. Okay, the rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Yee. Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you, colleagues. Today I'm introducing a resolution that would establish a multidisciplinary process for determining police staffing levels and essentially want to go through a factual array of study to determine what are the best ways to establish what our police staffing levels are. I think really essential to what our police staffing levels should be is what our communities are saying about the level of policing that they feel comfortable with. I think that we should also be looking at not anecdotal reasons, but real data to drive what staffing levels would make most sense. And I think it's important that we start off the process of a multidisciplinary process. We start off with collecting what's done out there in the world in policing in the United States. And so this resolution requests the legislative analysts to review public policy best practices for evaluating police staffing levels, and would like to have that sent to Public Safety Committee. The rest I'll submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Avalos. Supervisor Campos. Okay. Supervisor Christensen.
I have 2 items. Concerning the project at Seawall Lot 351, also known as 8 Washington, this project has become an example of probably how not to manage a waterfront planning project. Not only has the project been a lightning rod, but some of the underlying presumptions and foundations for the project have been determined to be shaky. I'm introducing a motion today to rescind the final environmental impact report for the 8 Washington site. This is needed in order for us to comply with recent orders of the San Francisco Superior Court, but it's also needed to clear the slate and allow us to make a new beginning in considering the future of this site and our northeastern waterfront. I also am introducing an ordinance amending the planning code. North Beach has some of the most extensive and restrictive planning code provisions in San Francisco, and while these restrictions have served the neighborhood well in many cases, as time has passed and retail and entertainment trends and need have evolved, some of these restrictions have resulted in a large number of empty storefronts and the accompanying neglect and decay at those sites. My staff and I are looking at modest and incremental changes to the planning code relative to the North Beach Special Use District to reflect what we've learned in the past 10 or 15 years and to reflect current retail and economic conditions. The ordinance I'm proposing allows a very narrow exemption for an exceptional location and an exceptional prospective tenant. It will allow the neighborhood's beloved Mama's restaurant and a new adjacent specialty market to occupy a large and visible building that has stood vacant and dark for nearly a decade. Having this prominent location in a tattered and sad state has reduced the viability of adjacent businesses and a key commercial corridor. This ordinance is a small step in addressing the larger economic and planning issues in the North Beach Special Use District, but it is a good step forward for our merchants, residents, and visitors. The rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Christensen. Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you very much. Good evening, colleagues. I have a in memoriam that I'd like to close, a request that I'd like to close the board meeting out in recognition of the life and contributions of Mr. Mellon Douglas Scott, Jr. He was the firstborn son, born April 15, 1945, a native of San Francisco, born to Mildred Jean Allen Scott and Mellon Douglas Scott Sr. He attended Ben Franklin Middle School and graduated from Galileo High School in April of '63 and moved on to San Francisco City College, where he played football with a passion. Mr. Scott was accepted as in an apprenticeship program in cement with the city and county of San Francisco and attended Langley Porter College in Oakland, where he attained his AA degree. He continued on with the Department of Public Works for 15 years, after which he moved on to the San Francisco Municipal Railway into the Department Overhead Lines, where he retired after 32 years of service. It was also during this time that Mr. Scott reconnected with the love of his life, Miss Carolyn Ransom, and they married after a 6-year-long pursuit. Mr. Scott joyfully assisted Miss Carolyn Ransom with her camp work and retreats under the American Baptist Church, where he earned the name Huggy Bear from the campers. Mr. Mellon Scott Jr. leaves to cherish his memory his loving wife of 38 years, Miss Carolyn Ransom Scott, 4 siblings, Blanche Williams, Walter, Harold Julius, Ida Shumoy, Jacqueline Scott, Brenda Joyce, Juan Gaines, as well as Aunt Rowena Wiggins, a mother-in-law, Miss Martha Ransom, and several nieces to cherish his memory. I ask that we close the board meeting in honor of his memory. The rest I submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Cohen. Supervisor Farrell. Submit. Supervisor Kim.
Following up on Supervisor Norman Yee's recognition of the 9 lives lost in the tragic mass shooting at Emmanuel African Methodist Church in Charleston, South Carolina, I'd just like to ask that this board in its entirety adjourn in the memory of those 9 lives: Cynthia Marie Graham, Susie Jackson, Ethel Lee Lance, DePayne Middleton Doctor, Clementa C. Pickney, Twanza Sanzers, Daniel Simmons, Sharonda Coleman Singleton, and Myra Thompson. And the rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim.
Colleagues, can we take Supervisor Kim's suggestion without objection? Without objection, we will adjourn on behalf of the entire board. Thank you, Supervisor Kim.
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Marr.
Thank you. Colleagues, today I'm introducing a resolution in support of racial justice. It's an Assembly Bill 953, a resolution in support of the Racial and Identity Profiling Act of 2015. It's been introduced by Assemblywoman Shirley Weber and strongly advocated for by police accountability groups from the ACLU of California to many other organizations. This important piece of legislation promotes equal justice and fairness by creating solutions to the problem of racial and identity profiling. I also want to thank my colleagues, Supervisor Kim, Campos, Avalos, and Cohen, for co-sponsoring this resolution. From Ferguson and Baltimore to San Francisco and Oakland, our attention has been ignited to the systemic problem of biased and racist policing at home and afar. At our hearing last Thursday before the Public Safety and Neighborhood Services Committee, addressing racism, sexism, homophobia, and anti-immigrant scapegoating and other forms of bigotry within our our city's justice system and police department, we heard from community organizations, including the ACLU of California Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice, or CJCJ, that just came out with a great report, the Asian Law Caucus, Jobs with Justice, and Coalition on Homelessness, and many other groups. Their resounding message was clear: where there's bias and discrimination, there's no security or effective policing. In light of the racist and homophobic texts discovered between several San Francisco police officers, as were mentioned before today, it's important that we support and implement not only citywide solutions, but also statewide solutions that will have real concrete impacts on our communities to make them safer. This bill will modernize California's definition of profiling to account for identity characteristics beyond race and create a system for collecting and reporting basic information on police-community interactions, enhance training on fair and impartial policing, and establish an advisory board statewide that would develop solutions to curb profiling. We see evidence of identity profiling in San Francisco and throughout the diverse Bay Area in reports from not only our police department, but many other police departments on the number of stops made by different groups. African American drivers make up 17% of all traffic stops in San Francisco, despite comprising only 6% of the city's population. 55% of Californians and 85% African Americans in California believe that African Americans and other people of color do not receive equal treatment in the criminal justice system. Profiling by law enforcement based on race or other identity characteristics rather than evidence of criminal activity misdirects limited resources away from evidence-based policing. The State Legislative Analyst's Office has found that California's current law prohibiting profiling by law enforcement currently fails to account for identity characteristics beyond race, and that law enforcement agencies have resisted following it because it is overly vague. So this will tighten up the policy and make it better. To prevent racial and identity profiling, protect communities of color from unjust policing, and rebuild trust between our police and the communities they serve, we must encourage the state to take the necessary steps included in this bill. This bill is a big step in the right direction to identify and address current problems in collecting and reporting police data and implementing mechanisms to reduce these institutionalized issues. Colleagues, I urge you to join me and my other colleagues in supporting this bill addressing these issues. And I wanted to thank ACLU racial justice advocate Chauncey Smith for his work on this at the state level. Also, I'm introducing with all of the members of the Board of Supervisors a resolution to declare July of every year henceforth as Americans with Disability Act Month in San Francisco. And I wanted to thank all of the colleagues. It's the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disability Act, or the ADA. I wanted to say it's grassroots organizations, people with disabilities themselves, and their direct action and history of their civil rights movement connected with so many other movements that really are why we have laws like the ADA on the books. July 26, 2015 marks the 25th anniversary of the signing of the landmark ADA, the first of its kind worldwide, and it creates a national mandate for the elimination of barriers for people with disabilities. 25 years ago, with the passage of the ADA, this country committed itself to the elimination of discrimination against many, many people with disabilities, and to create equal opportunities for them in employment, housing, and so many other areas. The Board of Supervisors will be proclaiming our pride and playing a critical role in supporting the ADA during the month of July, and also working towards a future in which all the doors are open to equally for opportunity for everyone with full participation, independent living, integration, and economic self-sufficiency for all people with disabilities. The seeds of the national ADA legislative efforts took hold in the San Francisco Bay Area with the start of the independent living movement in Berkeley and other areas of the Bay Area, and it culminated with a month-long occupation of San Francisco's Federal Building just a few blocks away from here in 1977. So first we had Alcatraz takeovers by Americans or Indians of all nations in 68, 69. Then about 10 years later, disabled people taking over the Federal Building, really direct actions to address their civil rights. And it directly led to the implementation of regulations of Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act federally. San Francisco has historically supported the rights of people with disabilities for equal opportunity and self-determination through legislative and financial actions. For example, over the past 25 years, our board has taken many, many steps to make accommodations for people with disabilities, such as increased access to buildings, increased access to these chambers, for example, and the pedestrian right-of-way, and supported legislation to mitigate accessibility barriers at public accommodations. However, as many of the grassroots people with disability organizations know and have been struggling for many years, there's much work to be done. Since our initial hearing on employment for people with disabilities last year, the Department of Human Resources has, I think, in a really great way, met monthly with a task force made up of grassroots leaders from disabled organizations, my office, and many others, to support the rights of people with disabilities to public employment. We've had ongoing discussions and are looking forward to another piece of legislation that will come forward to this board that comes out of those important task force meetings. The strong, diverse communities of people with disabilities, I salute them, and in passing this resolution, acknowledging every July as an important month where we celebrate the struggles of people with disabilities. Also, I wanted to say that beginning July 1st is a kickoff celebration of with the Mayor's Office on Disability and the Community Alliance for Disability Advocates, or CADA. We're celebrating a kickoff event July 1st, Wednesday from 11:30 to 1:30 in the Northlight Court, commemorating the 25th anniversary of the ADA. One of the leaders, Ed Roberts, disabled people's leader, civil rights leader, said the greatest lesson of the civil rights movement is that the moment you let others speak for you, you lose. I think the acknowledgement of people with disabilities speaking and organizing for themselves is critical as we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the ADA. We expect many of our grassroots community organizations, many of the historic leaders from the movements to be there. It'll be fun, historic, and educational with comedians, entertainers, and refreshment, and lots of gathering celebrating the history. If you want more information, the website is ada25bayarea.org. That's ada25bayarea.org. Thank you. The rest I'll submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Marr. Madam President, I see Supervisor Avalos' name on the roster, although I don't believe he's returned to the chamber. Otherwise, that concludes the introduction of new business.
Thank you. It's Mr. Chairman, but I'll be Madam President. That's fine.
Chair Wiener, thank you.
Okay. At this point, we'll move to public comment. Madam
At
Clerk.
this time, the public may comment generally for up to 2 minutes on items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board, including the minutes and the items on the immediate adoption calendar, items 32 through 35. Public comment is not allowed on those items which have already been subject to public comment at a board committee. And pursuant to the board's rules, direct your remarks to the board as a whole, not to the individual supervisors and nor to the audience. Speakers using translation assistance will be allowed twice the amount of time to testify, and if you would like to display your document on the overhead projector, please clearly state such to SFG TV and then remove the document when you would like the screen to return to live coverage of the meeting.
First speaker, please.
Good evening, Honorable President Breed, honorable members of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. My name is Reuben David Goodman. I'm a native San Franciscan. And this evening, on the centennial of City Hall, I would like to share with you an original poem. This poem popped into my mind fully composed. I had attended a public meeting at the Veterans Building when the City Hall was temporarily there. On walking down the hallway, there was a San Francisco flag hanging from a flagpole. I took the edge of the San Francisco flag between the tips of my fingers, unfurled it slightly. At the moment that I released the flag, this poem popped into my mind. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Iron is mighty, but gold never rusts. This poem coincidentally perfectly coincides with our city motto, Oro en paz, fierro en guerra. Gold in peace, iron in war. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
I may be using some slides. I'm Peter Warfield, Executive Director of Library Users Association. The American Library Association is holding its annual convention in San Francisco for the first time since 2001, 14 years ago. As we love books and libraries and librarians, we want to welcome them and with them wish them well, as I'm sure the city and the board do as well. But for both the ALA and your board, especially as you consider the city's budget, including the libraries and the library's performance, please keep in mind that the library's words do not always match its deeds, and appearances are not always the reality. About a year and a half ago, a nice book was published called The Public Library, with photographs by Robert Dawson. And it contained an essay by Luis Herrera called Spreading Enlightenment. And here's an excerpt. On any given day, children may be enjoying a rock concert in the library's auditorium while teens are learning DJing and movie making skills in the teen center. Well, that was a wish rather than a reality, and Luis Herrera was describing as reality what actually just opened last week, a year and a half or more after publication of the book. Now, with respect to magazines, as an example, you'd expect the library would do pretty well with magazines. When you go to find a New Yorker, there are no New Yorkers out on the shelf, neither the most recent nor the bound magazines, nor are there any nations. The New Yorker, in fact, is 3 months behind, yet there are such things as North Bay Business
Thank you
Journal
very much.
on the shelf.
Next speaker,
Thank you.
please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. This one's important. This is David Elliott Lewis. I'm speaking on behalf of both the Mental Health Board, of which I'm secretary, and the Crisis Intervention Training Team, of which I'm a volunteer trainer for the police department. This Wednesday, my Mental Health Board passed 2 important resolutions we'd like your supervisors to know of. Both are asking for funding for CIT. I don't know if you know, even though the Police Commission has asked the police department to do crisis intervention training, the trainers are all volunteer. We have almost no support from the police department other than us giving them. They give us 25 officers 3 times a year in a room to train. We have no support for professional actors, for role plays, for catering, for nothing. Furthermore, the Sheriff's Department has no CIT training other than just a few hours in their own academy. They don't follow the 40-hour Memphis model. So this resolution that we passed on our board is asking for both a budget line item for CIT funding for both the police, which is one item, and a separate resolution for the Sheriff's Department. The police at least have CIT training. The Sheriff's Department has none. So I'm hoping this is budget season, you will consider adding a line item to your budget to actually support CIT training. We don't need much money. Right now we have none. We're all volunteers. We can do so much more with just a small amount of money. Anyway, my board secretary will be passing the resolution on to you supervisors, so you can see the specific text. It's a very short and simple resolution. It will help make the city safer by teaching police and deputies to use verbal de-escalation rather than the threat of force when de-escalating people suffering a mental health crisis. CIT works. Crisis intervention works. We just need a little bit of support in your budget process.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ma'am, if you can come forward.
Buenas tardes, Madame, y a todos ustedes, supervisores, cada uno de ustedes por nombre.
Good evening, supervisors.
Lo que yo quiero decirles es que si me pueden ayudar, porque mis hijos están en proceso de deportación y uno me lo van a deportar en esta semana. Y él es homeless. Lo traje de 8 años y él nunca ha regresado a El Salvador y tiene 40 años y no tenemos familia ni tenemos nada allá y el crimen, yo tengo miedo porque mucho crimen.
So I am here to ask you today to help me because one of my sons is under deportation order. He has lived here in San Francisco for 8 years. He's homeless and...
Like a 38.
Okay, he's 40 years old,
Yeah.
and I really need you to intervene because I am from El Salvador, and it has, we've been here and we can't go back.
Quería suplicarles si ustedes podrían hacer algo para ayudarme. Algunas de ustedes son madres y deben de entenderme lo que siento. Por favor, se lo suplico y que Dios los bendiga y muchas gracias.
So I really want to ask all of you for your help. I know some of you are mothers and can understand my plight, and I really hope that somebody can help me, and I ask God to bless you.
God bless you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
SF TV have a video, no audio?
Yes.
I've been asked to give an update for the record. I will limit my comments to items that are not in dispute. On June 10th, Yale University released a year-long research study that analyzed the toxicity assessments of SBR tire crumb synthetic turf. It reported on 96 chemicals found in tire crumb. 20% were found to be carcinogens or probable carcinogens. As you already know, this corresponds to the 2003 OEHA finding that over 25% of tire crumb infill is known by the state to cause cancer. Within a year of completing the mini Lovey Ward field, that's Mr. Avalos' district, the RPD has already acknowledged tire crumb's significant problems when they announced plans to replace 3 existing tire crumb fields with organic fill. In March, the California State Senate Environmental Quality Committee, which includes Senator Mark Leno, unanimously approved a bill calling for further study of a tire crumb's cancer risks. This spring, the San Francisco Examiner conducted a poll titled, "Are you opposed to artificial turf at the beach chalet?" Results showed that over half the respondents, peaking at 80% at one point, prefer a natural turf. Also this spring, the University of San Francisco announced that it will be utilizing organic infill instead of tire crumb on its baseball field out of health concerns for the children who use the field, including cancer concerns. I think we all agree that the impact of trans fats and sugar pale in comparison to Hodgkin's lymphoma or other cancers that SBR carcinogens present. What will it take for this board or its members to stand up to the RPD and demand that they also prioritize children over skimping financial interests of their business associates by requiring that they also utilize organic infill at the beach chalet? As of today's date, this is a reasonable and very doable stipulation. As always, I'm available for clarification and further information, especially to
Thank
Supervisor
you.
Marr.
Next speaker, please.
Good evening. America is the worst fascist country in the world, in going in direction much worse. Hitler is laughing now that we called him fascist. Fascist is Obama, Lee, Board of Supervisors, this. You killed your people, like you killed Indians, like you killed million black. By the way, it's very interesting statistic. United Kingdom made 3 shots for a year. Last year, police made three shots. Can you believe 3 shots? Okay, United States made 1 million shots, police. It's very interesting. 3. Australia, New Zealand, in another country, police don't carry guns. United States, where are you going? Police don't carry guns. 3 shots in United Kingdom. Look what you do with the homeless. You made concentration camps on the street. People are eating from garbage, sleeping on the floor, never see doctors. 6 police came to my home, 6 police. I'm 85 years old and they naked throw me out on the street. 85 years old, Holocaust survivor. Have proclamation from Mayor Newsom, Mayor Lee, and from Board of Supervisors 2 times, and you throw me on the street. Who is fascist, Hitler or United States? Of course, United States. And you are guilty because you are the government, partly, but government.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, President Breed and supervisors. For Pride Month, I have a graphics. It's a gay Olympic medal and it's a gay slinky. There it is. Twilight Zone. Thought I'd show that. City one, son, oh city one. Good luck with your city trying. And I want to see you really thriving. And the city hall is 100, and you know you've just begun. Oh, city son, oh city one. And I know your district's enticing, and I want to see you really thriving. And the city hall is 100, and you know you've just begun. I can see her standing by the ocean water bay when the day is done, thinking of and smiling the campaign she's won. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Yeah, thank you, Supervisors, for letting me speak. My name is Rob Crystal. I'm in the 94109 zip code. Lived here 26 years. We have a little problem, unfortunately. It's kind of a negative thing, but you know, the people, mainly referring to bike riders. The problem with the city is, unfortunately, as far as bike riders, they're driving without crash helmets, without vesters, without lights. There's no laws in the city as far as lights and reflectors and crash helmets. I mean, it's a very small investment. But what's happening, these young adults as well as older adults, they're driving without these things. It's like driving a car without any lights. They're driving in the city. I've seen several casualties in the last several months due to people not driving properly on bicycles. Listen to Pandoria. I hate to bring drugs or alcohol involved, but it's kind of like Russian roulette. When I'm going on the street, I'm not being protected because I got people that are not obviously playing with a full deck, just driving around. It's a kind of a messed up situation. This city is such a nice city. I've lived here a long time, and if something could be done about it, like as far as maybe enforcing lights on bikes, reflectors on bikes, at least as proper, gear to be riding a bicycle in the city, because it's imperative. And I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me, and maybe looking forward to working with you again. The YMCA. And then me and my friend over here, we're all members of the YMCA, so we thank you for helping us. All right, God bless you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Pay attention. Every year for the last few years in June, I go hungry about 6 days in a row. It happens around Pride. Nobody seems to care about me at all. Starts off in LA, I'm 4 years old. Los Angeles earthquake. Starts shaking. Me and my brother wake up, so we're jumping on the bed. My mom and dad come into our room and say, "You're shaking the whole house." They say we're lying. Then the real earthquake happens. My dad starts beating me, doesn't stop beating me till I'm 13. Turn into a liar, a thief. Then the voice of Jesus came to me. So I'm in San Francisco, I'm going, there's a real God. I don't want this riches. There's a real God. He'll prevail me. 20 years later, he gave me a house on top of Twin Peaks, which I thought I took from you guys because you wouldn't replace my sleeping bag. Anyway, so I'm up there in this house, and he's prevailed me, and he's going to show you. He's not just showing me. He's going to one day show you, and that's still my house, and he's given it to me, and it's up above everybody else. He was risen above everybody else. He prevailed me in this lifetime. Anyway. So I clean Twin Peaks every day, and then after half a day cleaning, I go to the Castro, and the rest of the day I'm there and no one gives me $1. I go home hungry, and it's really horrible on me my mental recovery. It's horrible to go 6 days in a row and no one cares. On top of, they're always thinking I'm a thief, and they're always treating me. Oh, by the way, I didn't hear homeless on that list. It's still okay for the police to treat homeless bad, right? Because homeless isn't even prejudice. It's like saying my donkey got excluded from the store. I'm Dane. I'm the hero. I take care of your city. What's up?
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
And you can make donations today. I'm hungry today. Hey, dude. Oh, I'm good today. But check me around Gay Pride. You'll see how depressed I am and poor and hungry.
Thank you, President Breed and other members, victims of the cabal. My name is Christopher Dahl, and I live at 6th and Howard, 10 blocks and less than 14 meters from sea level. I rise to comment on the perils of systems development. First, the rule of thumb for systems development. Projects take 3 times the estimated development time. Projects cost 3 times more money than the original estimate. Projects only satisfy 1/3 of the stated requirements, and only 1/3 of the actual requirements are stated. Why? Well, there's the rule of dumb. Systems are complicated, but organizations are not. Organizations are only 1/3 as intelligent as the average intelligence of the people involved. 1/3 on a good day, on a very, very, very good day. Members, once having some measure of systems expertise myself, I offered to this board, February 2nd, 2010, a comment suggesting that my beloved city and county of San Francisco create a data dictionary of its governance. Basically a list of all tasks and persons, roles, and resources pertinent to its various operations. If you'd set that up, all the controller would have had to do to set up a new finance system was pull out the dictionary, compare it with a known set of future needs, prioritize the absolutely necessary, make a list, and work to it. Don't change requirements. If you forgot something, there's always an inevitable phase 2. Finally, there's the rule of numb. People are numb to advice they didn't ask for or paid for. So thank you for the opportunity to exercise my public speaking skills.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and the Board of Supervisors. My name is Binyam Bakela, and I've been living in San Francisco since 1971. I was married, got divorced in 1998. I got injured. The judge ruled for me in favor, and I've been living in a condition like this the last 6 years, since 2009 up till the 12. Before that, I couldn't even walk from here to the next chair. And all this time, I was being harassed. I was like a dead person. They left me out there. Board of Supervisors, I have every evidence. I never had any crime. I never had anything wrong in this city. I could take the lie detector test. Ladies and gentlemen, and they are playing me. I couldn't even walk to the grocery store now. One lady, she came to me from behind. They sent her, and she did like this, and I just told her, smiling. I said, that aspect of my life is in the bank, in a safe box. Number 2, I told her, there is a video camera, unfortunately, you'll be seen. They are following me step by step, and they cut me from all of my friends, everybody. And I'm sure I can be put in a lie detector test and give me some. I went to Mr. Campos' office yesterday. I showed all my evidence, and I have everything from A to Z. If they want to show up, I'll be very happy. I never lie. I always tell truth to power. And Board of Supervisors, now they are trying to do something on me. I live in fear. I have everything, every evidence whatsoever.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Your time is up. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, John Down, San Francisco. This is Williams, 1948. I was walking in Savannah past this church, decayed and dim, when slowly through the window came a plaintive funeral hymn, and my sympathy awakened, and a wonder quickly grew, till I found myself seated in a little old church pew. Out front, a lonely couple sat in sorrow, nearly wild. On the altar was a casket. In the casket was a child. I could picture him while living, curly hair, smiling face. I seemed perhaps 1,000 in my hurried southern trips. Then rose a sad old black country preacher from his little wooden desk, and he said, "Now don't be weeping for this pretty bit of clay, for the little boy who lived there has gone and run away. The Lord didn't give you that baby by 100,000 miles. He just thought you needed the sunshine, and He lent Him for a while. And He let you keep and love Him till your hearts were bigger grown. And those silver tears you're shedding now are just interest on the loan. So my poor dejected mourners, let your hearts with heaven rest, and don't go criticizing the one that knows the best. He had given many comforts. He has the right to take away." And in conclusion, I say, He has the right to take away, not you, me, or anyone else. And I had to say that all lives matter, not just one particular group. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Greetings, Board of Supervisors, Madam President. I'm speaking on item 34. We have time from Jamal Stokely. Would it be okay if I go over, if I use some of his? I'll try to get it done in the 2 minutes, but if not, is that okay to cede time from another person?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, well,
Mr.
guess
Parker.
we'll come back up or I'll talk fast.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you the first time, so.
No, that is okay.
Okay, so we'll start your time off. Okay.
All right, so my name is Brian Parker. I'm an Oakland Port Commissioner, and I'm a member of the 100 Black Men. We're here to speak on item 34. I'd like to thank the Board of Supervisors and especially Supervisor Cohn for bringing this forward. We started this movement in Oakland around the Black Lives Matter. We have introduced it here through Supervisor Cohen, through others in San Jose, and we want to make this a national issue. You see the specific number of asks that are before you. This is less around the numbers as you were debating earlier and more around behavior. Certainly, as we know, and I hope that you guys will continue to focus on education and jobs, it's those things, in our opinion, that are most highly correlated with poverty and lead to the violence that we've seen happening in Baltimore and Oakland and other places around our nation. So we're here to speak today in support of this resolution that's also in support of Senate Bill 411. We think it is imperative that we focus on training, good mental health, body cameras and making sure that those are working, and then on citizens being able to take evidence and not being prosecuted. We would most of all like to promote good relations. Your deputy chief is one of my fraternity brothers and has done several things in the community. We think in the long term those kind of community relations are best for allowing us to understand each other. And lastly, I think it's imperative that we focus on definitions around training of when it's permissible and appropriate to use lethal force. So we would really hope that you would support this resolution. We'd stand by for any questions, and thank you for entertaining us today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parker, and welcome to San Francisco. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Madam President, Board of Supervisors. My name is Philip Barnett. I'm also a member of the 100 Black Men, a board member of the 100 Black Men. I'm also here in support of our initiative that we've submitted as a resolution with Supervisor Cohen, which I thank you for taking the time and taking the effort to help push this forward around the 100 for Life initiative in order to ensure more safe policing in our cities and also safer communities. It is sad that a bill like this is necessary, but it is in direct response to the lack of safety and justice many in our community members feel they have, especially in communities of color. We historically and even very recently have seen what can happen when we do not make a concerted effort to investigate and address the inequalities and inequities that are taking place in our society. This oversight has allowed many to unjustly live in fear and have their rights taken away from them. This is not only a bill to protect the public, but also the officers who are supposed to protect them. Video is a medium that is employed very successfully across all industries, and it is a travesty that we don't effectively employ in a space where people's lives are constantly at stake. It is ridiculous to criminalize people who are only trying to protect themselves and peers in a way that does not interfere with police work at all. And we've seen over the past, especially just in this last year, all the heinous crimes that have gone unnoticed had there not been a citizen with videotape of the incident that has now caused an uproar. We now need to protect that citizen's right to be able to quantify evidence and also protect their fellow citizens that may be unjustly harassed by police. I know that we can't effectively wipe out all or stop all racist acts that are happening within our government, within our police forces, but it is our civic duty, and it is your civic duty, to ensure that we do all that is possible to ensure that it is not happening, or that it has the least likeliness of happening. So with this, I ask that you please support State Senate Bill 411. But thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
I'd like to use the overhead.
So this is a picture of a Nazi rally in the Rotunda here in San Francisco in 1935. Already that same year, well, actually 2 years prior to that, in March of 1933, Dachau had been opened. So this Nazi rally that was attended here in San Francisco by the mayor is and archived in this photograph is shocking, and taken by actually a Jewish man who immigrated here to San Francisco because of the ethnic cleansing that was going on in Nazi Germany. This next picture shows that in 1965, right outside in front of City Hall, San Francisco flew the Confederate flag, or what's called the Confederate flag. It actually, in actuality, is not the Confederate flag. So it seems to me like nothing has changed. We are still at the same place that we were in the early 1960s, when black men were being terrorized back then by the Klan, today by law enforcement. Why is it that 1 in every 17 African Americans in San Francisco that are male spend the night in county jail? Why is that? Because 4% of the population is African American. 50% of the arrests made in San Francisco of women are African American. Nothing has changed. You know, Martin Luther King, I think if he were here today, his quote would be very relevant today when he said that a white man's heaven is a black man's hell. And this Board of Supervisors is no different. We have our gay and our white supervisors continually vote against the interests of African Americans and Latinos. We saw Latinos get kicked out of this forum and not be able to speak. Nothing has changed because the racism that pervades that Obama talked and said that using the N-word in public is not acceptable, but that doesn't mean racism doesn't still exist. So you take away the N-word, but you leave all your policies.
Next speaker, please.
Tom Gilberti, 2000. The president was in town. I was wondering if the money he raised is going to go and spend to the Democratic Congress people to vote for TPP first, and get that one through. Little barnstorming, I guess, came from San Francisco. Does Uber, do corporate buses increase access? I don't think so. The people in South Carolina have a flag, a tradition. They're having a value system that needs to be changed. We can see it. We over here in San Francisco probably have a harder time seeing our value system, what we need to change, what we need to move ahead. Housing that 88% of us can't afford. Long-term renting security, none. Legal evictions, okay. Renters kicked out, speculators moved in, communities, neighbors, traditions shattered. And all you with dollars, come on in, you can play. I can expand, but let's go back to housing. And I recommended for every 5 years you lived in a place, you got 3% of the cost of your building when it was sold. A 20-unit building, 5 stories, 4 equal properties on each floor, everybody living there 10 years. They would get 6%, the building sold of $10 million, $600,000 is 6%. Times 20 units, it's $12 million. It doesn't work. With 4 seconds left, I have to finish. Bye.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Board of Supervisors. My name is Martha Ryan, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Homeless Prenatal Program here in San Francisco. I don't often come to these meetings because I'm working, but since I'm here, I thought I would get up and introduce myself to you. The Homeless Prenatal Program serves poor and homeless families here in San Francisco, and we've been doing it for 26 years. Our focus is on pregnant mothers and families with children 0 to 5. Our mission is to end the cycle of childhood poverty, and that's a real tall order here in San Francisco when we have so many families that are homeless and can't afford to provide a place for their children to sleep at night, not to mention to feed them or to keep them in school. I just would like to invite, some of the supervisors have been to the Homeless Prenatal Program, and there's no substitute to a site visit and to seeing the programs in action. Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi has been twice, and she said that we are a model for the nation. We have a staff of 80, more than half are former clients. We invest in the people we serve, and I welcome any of you to come to see what we do and to learn how you can really make a difference. And we're doing the best we can, but without housing, it's really tough. Without jobs, it's even tougher. And just want to encourage you to think about the entire city and not just your districts. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to provide public comment at this time? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Madam Clerk, can you please go to the adoption without committee reference?
Items 32 through 35 are being considered for immediate adoption without committee reference. A single roll call vote may enact these items. A member may object and sever an item and have it considered separately.
Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to sever item number 34.
Okay. Supervisor Weiner.
35.
Okay, items 32 through, 33. I guess, items 32 and 33. Roll call vote.
Supervisor Weiner. Weiner, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen.
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Yes.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr. Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. There are 11 ayes.
Okay, those items are adopted unanimously. Madam Clerk, can you call item number 34?
Item 34 is a resolution to support California State Senate Bill 411, the Right to Record Bill, authored by Senator Ricardo Lara, which states that anyone making an audio or video recording of a police or peace officer in the public place that the individual has a right to be in is not breaking the law.
Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, today I'm asking for your support in the passage of this resolution. We've been joining the countrywide conversation and action over reforms in our police department, and I regret that many of the activistas that were here earlier today are not here to hear about this resolution. That's equally as important. We have, along with some of my colleagues here on the board, have stood together to announce some important reforms that even the police department has been supportive of. A few of them include the implementation of police-worn body cameras, more funding for the Office of Citizens Complaints, more police cadet classes, bias training within the police department. Senate Bill 411, authored by Senator Ricardo Lara, states that anyone making an audio or video recording of a police or peace officer in a public place that an individual has the right to be in is not breaking the law. This resolution before you today encourages our city to continue to do more for our citizens by moving forward policies that will make our police department the best and, more importantly, the most diverse department in the country. We can have better training on how and when to use force, record better data on stops and determinate detainments by the police, as well as the sheriff department. and to develop a 21st century policing strategy for a city to guide by the develop a 21st century policing strategy for a city, which is actually guided, ironically, coming out of the President's 21st century policing report that was issued earlier this year. I want to acknowledge Brian Parker and the other gentleman that spoke on behalf of 100 Black men of San Francisco and Oakland that are here in support of this resolution. I hope that you will join us. This has truly been a community collaborative effort. I hope I can count on your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Cohen. Colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, this resolution is adopted unanimously. Madam Clerk, can you call item 35?
Item 35 is a motion to approve a final map 8005, a 5 residential unit condominium project located at 135 Buena Vista Avenue West.
Supervisor Wiener.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, you'll recall we continued this last week because we had received a letter from the tenant's attorney, Mr. Collier, that the owners had not offered a lifetime lease to the tenant. And so we continue for a week to try to resolve the situation. That lifetime lease has now been offered, and so we can move forward with item 35.
Okay, colleagues, can we take item 35, same house, same call? Without objection, this motion is approved unanimously. Okay, colleagues, or Madam Clerk, would you please read the in memoriams?
Yes, Madam President. Today's meeting will be adjourned in memory of the following beloved individuals. On behalf of Supervisor Cohen, for the late Mr. Mellon Douglas Scott, Jr., and at the suggestion of Supervisor Kim and Supervisor Yee, on behalf of the entire Board of Supervisors, for the 9 lives slain in the shooting at Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina, Cynthia Marie Graham, Susie Jackson, Ethel Lee Lance, DePayne Middleton Doctor, Clementa C. Pickney, church pastor and state senator, Tywanza Sanders, Daniel Simmons, Sharonda Coleman Singleton, and Myra Thompson.
Thank you, colleagues. This brings us to the end of our agenda. Madam Clerk, is there any further business before us?
That concludes our business for today, Madam President.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
SF Gov TV.